Ask everyone, please be seated, which you are. Thank you. Welcome to the Community Development Board meeting. It's called to order today, May 16th, 2023. At this time, I'd like you all to please stand and welcome and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the City Council and serve voluntarily. I am John Quattrocchi. I will ask the other members and the staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Bruce Rector.
Diane Antonelli.
Jay Daigneault, attorney for the board.
Andrew Caudell.
Andrew Hupp.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so that they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so that we might hear all of the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's action, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us. Clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. I will ask all those in attendance today who plan to speak to please rise and be sworn in by the clerk.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout your entire testimony?
I do.
Thank you.
Agendas of today's meeting are on the podium to your left near the entry door. Also on this podium are a roster of the Community Development Board, the list of city staff experts and their resumes, the board's rules of procedure, and the annual schedule of this board. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last month's meetings. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? At this time, there's an opportunity for citizens to be heard regarding items that are not on today's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to bring a matter before the board? Please come forward.
My name is Peter Kohut, K-O-H-U-T. I represent the village on Island Estates, which is an adjacent property just to the north of the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. While I'm here for that hearing, as a registered professional engineer retired in the state of Indiana and Florida, I wanted to remind the board and the city, if I may, that as you guys make your decisions, that all of your decisions have consequences. And certainly the aquarium and its development there has had plenty of consequences, especially to our area there at the Village and Island Estates. One of the problems that we have occurred since they have moved there in the heyday of the aquarium, when winter was alive and the attendance was at its very peak, we had the adjacent property to the north of us, which was an adjacent vacant land, was gathering stormwater. I brought some pictures here. This works.
To the case.
Yeah.
Is this going to the case, though? Is this
I spoke to Mr. Kohut before the meeting, indicated to me that his comments did not concern the application that's come before you today.
Right.
Are we on the same page on that?
Yes, and I'd like more than just 3 minutes, if I may, Chair.
How much time are you looking for?
Like 5.
Do I have any members on the board?
Okay, so what happened here, this is the adjacent residential grassy area that is owned by the church, St. Brendan, and it always accumulated water and stood there for years and years and years. And once the aquarium moved in and needed more parking, they came up with a deal with the church. The aquarium came up and asked the church if they could park there. Well, the church couldn't accept that because of the water that was standing there. So the church dumped several loads of fill, of gravel, and dirt, and raised the elevation of that parking area. And here's some more pictures. And again, this is before. Afterwards, once they got the elevation high enough, and the CMA was able to use that as a paid parking area, they went ahead and started parking there. And the problem with this is the church should have applied to the city of Clearwater to get a permit to develop a parking lot in that area. Once that area was filled in like this and people started parking there, we began to get stormwater that used to stand there. It now is being pushed onto our property, and we've had to begin reconstruction of our roadway. And this, again, is the consequences of what happened there. And so I have tried working with Gina Clayton. I've met with 2 city managers, a couple mayors, and I've gotten nowhere. And this is kind of the last, my Hail Mary for this. We've had to reconstruct our frontage road, and it's going to cost like $75,000. And we've sat down with the church, Father Tim, and they feel like they have no obligation to help us reconstruct a road or put in any kind of storm sewer. And I think, again, this has been caused by the lack of the city requiring a permit to develop a parking area. If you were to develop a parking area, usually you submit stormwater calculations, you build some sort of obscuring fence between you and a residential area, and that's all included in your code that the city uses. And I wanted you to make you aware of this situation, and hopefully you'll be able to encourage the city to sit down, if nothing else, get the church to put in a storm sewer to take care of this so that we don't have to reconstruct our road again. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
How much do you think that they've created in terms of permeability where it's been reduced to what degree where it would perk before?
Well, before the water stood on that property, and of course they couldn't use it until they raised the elevation, but I'd say that, when we get the typical Florida rainstorms, there's only so much that will seep into the ground, and then after that it overflows like that picture shows. And then once it gets onto our roadway, then it runs down the roadway, and we have repaired that road, I think, 3 times in the last 5 years. And so now we're into the phase where we're just going to reconstruct a road. And, sitting down with Father Tim, we first asked them if they would participate in paying. And of course that didn't go very far. And so now, at least, we would like the city to take care of the situation by enforcing their codes, putting up an obscuring fence, and dealing with the stormwater, either sheet drainage to Larbour Way, or put in a inlet and some pipe and take it to their retention area.
We'll bring it up to city and get rebuttal on it from staff. Okay?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
This board has adopted a consent agenda format, and the consent items are identified as such on the agenda. Consent agenda items are those items for which the Planning and Development Department recommends approval. The applicant is in agreement with any proposed conditions, and no written objections to the case have been received to date. Items that may be removed from the consent agenda today by a member of the board, a member of the staff, or any person in the audience for questions or objections. I will read each item on the consent agenda, and if any person wishes to remove this item from the consent agenda, please so state, raise your hand, and we will remove it from the consent agenda. Items removed from the consent agenda will be heard in the regular order of the meeting. Items that remain on the consent agenda will approve with a single vote. We have one item today. Item 1 is case FLD 2023-02004. 279 Windward Passage. The owner is Clearwater Marine Aquarium, City of Clearwater. Representative is Terry Skapek, Woods Consulting Inc., Dunedin, Florida. Location, the subject of 4.526 acre property is located on the south side of Windward Passage, approximately 250 feet west of Island Way. The Community Development Board is reviewing a proposed 1,150 square foot expansion to an existing commercial dock for the property located at 279 Windward Passage. The project is 35 feet in length and 960 feet in width. Request allowable flexibility for square footage and dock width of a commercial dock pier greater than 500 square feet in deck area. Associations, Clearwater Neighborhoods Coalition, Board of County Commissioners, Pinellas County School Board, Clearwater Beach Association, Village on Island Estates Condo Association. The assigned planner is Mark T. Perry. Is there any motion to have this removed? We have one, so it'll be heard in the regular course of the meeting. We will now go on to the regular agenda. The cases that we will hear today are Level 2 quasi-judicial hearing cases. All Level 2 cases, such as flexible development, are considered quasi-judicial hearings. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the Community Development Board reviews the application, the staff report, correspondence, and all evidence presented today and makes a final decision subject to appeal. This board has previously qualified all of city staff who will testify as experts in their area of professional training, education, and experience. The list of city staff experts and their resumes are in the handbook on the podium near the entry door. Any other professionals who desire to be qualified as an expert witness shall so request at the beginning of the case and present a resume to each board member. The board shall determine whether or not to qualify the person as an expert and in what field of study. At the beginning of each Level 2 case, I will ask for anyone who wishes to request party status to come forward and state your reasons. Party status may be granted if the person requesting such status demonstrates that they are a substantially affected person. The board will then determine whether or not to grant party status. Then the case will proceed as follows. Request for party status, presentation by planning and development staff, 10 minutes maximum. Presentation by the applicant, 10 minutes maximum. Presentation by persons with party status, 5 minutes per party maximum. Cross-examination of witnesses by planning and development staff, cross-examination of witnesses by applicant, cross-examination of witnesses by persons with party status. Comments by the public, 3 minutes per person. Closing remarks of the planning and development staff, 3 minutes maximum. Closing remarks by persons granted party status, 3 minutes maximum. Closing remarks by the applicant, 3 minutes maximum. There will be closing of the public hearing, discussion, and vote by the board. Today we have 5 members on our board, of the 7 members present. If it's my understanding, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, that with 5 members of the board only, that if you wanted to pull your case today and get it postponed for a meeting, you could so do so, right?
You continue until there's a full board, that's correct.
Yeah. Do we go case by case, or just do anybody at
You can ask now if any of the applicants.
Does anybody want to postpone their case to the next meeting, to a full board? Seeing none, we will proceed. So just to go into that, though, the quorum of 5 members is required to conduct the business of the board. The vote of at least 4 members is required for action on any item before the board. If a decision results in a 3-2 vote, the matter shall automatically be continued to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board for a decision.
And you've already read your first item, the one that was pulled off consent agenda, so you could.
Just go to
that
it.
now. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we will do item number 1, case FLD 2023-279 Windward Passage.
Did we ask for party status for this case?
No, we didn't. Thank you. Is there anyone here wishing party status on this case? We'll now begin with it. We'll start with presentation by Planning and Development staff.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I would ask that the board accept Mr. Mark Perry as an expert witness in general planning, zoning, redevelopment planning, land development code, and land development code amendments, special area plans and overlay districts, site plan review, landscape architecture, and all other matters he is about to testify hereon.
I have a motion.
Move to approve Mr. Perry as an expert witness on the subject matters proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mark?
Okay, thank you. Mark Perry, Planning and Development. The site is located on the south side of Windward Passage. It's zoned commercial with an underlying land use of commercial general. The proposed dock expansion will be located on submerged land, obviously. That's located within the Preservation Zoning District. As we know, the site has been developed with the Clearwater Marine Aquarium, and it does include an existing 42-slip marina. The marina operates as a satellite facility for the City of Clearwater's beach municipal marina access. And access is provided via the CMA property. The proposal is to replace an existing slip on the far east side of the site, slip 1, with a new fixed and floating dock arrangement of about 1,100 square feet. It doesn't necessarily expand the use of the docks. It's a replacement, and the purpose is to provide ADA accessible access to boats.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but before you do it, go on any further, the objection was by a board member, and I just wanted to know if there was just a particular question, or did you want to hear the whole presentation?
A few particular questions.
Oh, sure, I
Yeah,
can
it might
skip
save
the
some
questions
time.
if you want to.
Yeah.
Sure. Somewhat familiar with marinas since I own one and deal with these issues all the time. And I was looking at the upland area relative to ADA. You say this is just an ADA matter?
Correct, that's
So is there a ADA marked pathway that meets code to this ramp that you're aware of?
not that I'm aware of, but, I walked it, I didn't pay attention to ADA compliance, but it seemed like a fairly level, straight shot to the back. Otherwise, I can't.
Yeah, I saw that as a big issue, that whole waterfront area there. It slopes inward, probably at a 5% grade, and I didn't know where it's coming from. Do you know where the access point is for the?
No, I defer to the applicant on that. I looked at more straight code requirements, width and length and things like that.
And then relative to the dock configuration, was that designed by the city?
No, this configuration?
Yeah.
No, to the best of my knowledge, it was designed by the applicant, Woods Consulting.
Woods designed it? Does the city own it, or who's going to own this?
I believe the entire thing is owned by the city, but I'll also again defer to the applicant to the specifics of.
So there's no input by the city relative to the design?
No, there is. The harbor master reviewed this as well. He's part of the development review committee, and the harbor master doesn't have any issues with the proposal.
So I see 2 fixed docks and 2 gangways relative to the ADA ramp. What's the inside fixed dock for in that gangway?
I would defer to the applicant on that.
Are they here? Or?
So we should, they're getting particular, I probably do want to just go forward then with the regular
At the
course of
chair's
the meeting.
election, you can continue with the presentation and fire away when they're done, or you can make them now.
I think,
Yeah.
is there more questions about, do you think they're all applicant questions?
Yes.
Do you want to defer to that? And is that okay? I know we're jumping out of order here, but we have a long meeting today, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Why don't we do that? And if the applicant representative
And
would step forward.
I'll finish up in 30 seconds or
Okay.
less. The staff has provided a series of findings of fact and conclusions of law, and we are recommending approval of the submittal.
Thank you.
And I'll refer to the applicant.
afternoon. My name is Terry Skapik, president of Woods Consulting. Our company provides marine design and permitting services. Been in business for 20 years now and have worked through hundreds of different projects at the municipal level, commercial dock level, multifamily dock level. So just to answer some of your questions, I know you started with the first question, was the upland development already meeting the ADA access pathway? At this point in time, I can't answer that. I know that the first order of business was to make sure the dock could be permitted, because dock permitting is a very challenging process. There's so many different agencies involved. We've got local, here at the City of Clearwater, we've got Pinellas County Water Navigation. We have Southwest Florida Water Management District, who has already issued their permit for this dock, and we have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who are in review and very soon expected to issue their permit. So the whole point of starting with the docks was just because of the numerous different agencies. They have to look at site conditions, environmental conditions, they even have to do manatee impact reviews. There's so much that goes into that, getting the full bundle of permits together before they would take the next step to make sure they have the correct ADA access connection on land. As far as, I believe your next question was, I don't know if I have this up correctly. I need to rotate it.
Towards you.
There we go. So here's just a blow-up of just what's proposed. So we of course have two components to this dock, and that's because not everybody that's going to be using this dock is ADA, but they want to make sure that people that do need ADA have the ability to have the ADA. So what you're seeing is the 4-foot wide gangway with just a 22-foot long ramp. That's just so that the person that doesn't need that extra ADA can get quicker access onto the dock. And then the longer route with the upper fixed dock, the smaller gangway, the larger fixed dock landing, and then the longer 45-foot ADA gangway. That system to the right in this picture is going to allow for those with ADA to have all the proper components to get out to the main floating dock.
So is the inside fixed dock the same elevation as the outside fixed dock?
It is to the right side, no. The gangway takes it down to a 1 foot. There's a 1 foot drop to the lower landing, and then the ADA from there takes you down to the ADA.
Great. So your cross-section didn't present that. That's why I'm asking the question.
It actually,
It wasn't in my material.
hang on 1 second. Yes, you're correct. It should have had that terminal. Not that we didn't have a correct location for our cross-section, but it's kind of hard to show that from just a true 3D or 2D with a side view. But that segment does come down 12 inches elevation-wise.
That was really my only question. And I know the ADA access on land seems way out of kilter, and it looks very expensive, and I want to bring it to the city's attention.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the aquarium's expense and not the city's, I take.
that's correct. The city, and that was another one of your questions, the city of Clearwater is the submerged land owner. The Clearwater Marine Aquarium upland is owned separately by the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. And I know that they had actually slated this project for several years ago, and due to cost and funding, it was only just until last year that we were given the go-ahead to take it to permitting. So I know that there was a period of time where they were, getting the funds together to make this happen. And it is replacing one existing slip. There's the north slip, they call slip number 1. They are actually that one's already been closed off. They're not even using it right now. They have a float in there with just their paddle boards and kayaks in there right now that they're storing on the float. And then this new dock is basically going to replace that. And this is where the taxi is going to pull up and, pick up not the taxi, for their eco tours.
Are there any public docks for the aquarium as a part of the 42?
Actually, there are some public docks. Yes, they are authorized for some public docks. I believe there are 9 that are rented to the public.
daily use, if I wanted to go to the aquarium, are there any available?
So the majority, we have the breakdown, if you want to know the breakdown. I mean, if you wanted to put your name on a list, I know that they're all
No,
occupied.
if I wanted to go to the aquarium, is there a dock available for me by?
Oh, I'm sorry, like if you're just going there for the day to go visit the aquarium? No, sir, no, there's not. There are there's slips that are used, they have taxi boats that bring their guests in from different locations. They have some slips that they rent out to the Quality Boat business next door. They have a few slips that they rent out to the public, they're available. And then they have this now for their eco tour boat to be ADA.
So the aquarium, they have ownership of all the slips, and they rent them out and they sublease from the city?
Yes,
Because I know the docks next door, they're all available to the public for daily use at the restaurant.
yes, Island Way, yes, we did those docks there too, that's, yes.
So I'm wondering, for staff, why wouldn't there be some day use available for the aquarium as a part of the 42 slips? And that's not a question to you, that's to the staff.
Understood.
And that's really all I have, thank you.
That's a good question. Okay, thank you. Is there, go ahead.
I have one question that came into me. With this proposed new feature being put in there and this being like a offloading, loading area, and you have the restaurant relatively, Island Way Grill, relatively close by to it. You said during this that slip currently is just like a storage slip where they keep their kayaks or whatever. If people are going in and out and this boat is going in and out on a regular basis, the fumes and the gas and everything, you've got people eating right outside. Is that going to, how that's going to impact that? I mean, is it far enough away?
It's, the actual proposed dock is not within like a side setback. I mean, even though it's combined with, it's requesting a variance, the actual setback it's not encroaching on any setback. So it's not any closer than it would be allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wonder, just because you've got people that are sitting outside all the time and it sounds like it's gonna be more traffic and more noise.
Yeah, and I've been on that boat several times now with Captain George, and I've never experienced any fumes whatsoever when I've been on that boat. He actually gave me a tour of the area, kind of was like, he actually helped me and the crew get a bunch of depth measurements just to make sure we had good depth out there. And so, yeah, I never had that experience, and I was on the boat at least 3 times.
Okay, I just,
Thank you.
And I'm available if you have any further questions.
At this time, if there's any cross-examination by planning and development, cross-examination by the applicant, comments by the public. If there's anybody that would like to come forward and comment. Closing remarks by planning and development.
I just wanted to reiterate that from a zoning standpoint, the only aspect of ADA that we typically look at are number of parking spaces. So from a zoning standpoint, certainly at a CDB level of review, we don't look at ADA requirements. That's really under the purview of the building department and the building officials. I just wanted to clarify that.
Closing remarks by applicant, anything? We'll now close this to the public hearing. Do I have discussion and vote by the board?
I move to approve this item.
You need to,
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve case number 1, case FLD 2023-02004, based on the evidence and testimony presented in the application, the staff report, and at today's hearing, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with conditions of approval as listed.
is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. now go on to the regular course. We'll go on to item F1, case FLD 2009-02-002A / PLT 2023-03002 at 2680 Landmark Drive. The owner is Heritage United Methodist Church, Countryside, Inc. Representative, forgive me about the name, Krikor Kasarjan, and Robert Pergolozzi, Gulf Coast Consulting. Location is 8.630 acres, consisting of one parcel, located at the southwest corner of Landmark Drive and State Road 580. To be platted into two separate parcels, parcel 1 to the north and will be 3.95 acres, and parcel 2 to the south will be 4.68 acres. The Community Development Board is reviewing a two-lot preliminary plat and amendment to a previously approved site plan, FLD 2009-02002, to retain the existing place of worship use on the proposed parcel 1 and convert the existing school to a medical clinic use on proposed parcel 2 in the institutional district for the property located at 2680 Landmark Drive. The project is less than 50 feet in height, provides a minimum of 140 off-street parking spaces, and requests allowable flexibility from setbacks, off-street parking, and landscape requirements. Associations are the Clearwater Neighborhoods Coalition, Board of County Commissioners, Pinellas County School Board, Northwood West Homeowners Association. Signed planner is Melissa Hawk Baker. At this time, is there anybody requesting party status? Please state.
Chris Curvin, Curvin, Northwood Presbyterian Church. I'm the pastor there. Of the different organizations you mentioned in that the last statement you made, we were the ones that were not listed, and we're yet on the deed, the warranty deed for the egress as Westminster Presbytery.
Okay, Chris. Do I have a motion to accept party status?
I move to accept this gentleman, grant this gentleman party status for the purposes of this hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So we'll call you up. We'll call you back up. You're good. Is there anybody else? At this time, we'll have a presentation by Planning and Development.
Mr. Chair, I have two witnesses I'd like to swear in for the board.
Okay.
First, I would ask that the board accept Ms. Melissa Hawk Baker as an expert witness in general planning, zoning, redevelopment planning, land development code, and land development code amendments, special area plans, overlay districts, site plan review, landscape architecture, historic preservation, comprehensive science program, and all other matters she is about to testify hereon.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve Ms. Hawk Baker as an expert witness in the subject matters proposed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next, I would ask that the board accept Mr. Omar Atala as an expert witness in civil engineering, land development, utilities, construction and building permits, traffic management, traffic safety, and transportation engineering, among all other matters he is about to testify hereon.
Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve Mr. Atala as a subject matter expert on the subject matters proposed.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Good afternoon, Melissa Hauck Baker with the Planning and Development Department. The case before you today is a combination of the amendment to a Level 2 previous application. So that is FLD 2009-02002A. and it includes a plat, which is PLT 2023-03002. I'm trying to get it to go to the full screen, but I'm challenged.
Most of us are.
Ella's got your back.
I mean, you can just do that. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. So the location is at the southwest corner of Landmark Drive and Main Street, which is State Road 580. It consists right now of one parcel, and as you see on the rendering that's on the screen, the blue area represents the zoning district, which is institutional. The subject property is within the institutional zoning district with a future land use of institutional. The surrounding area is predominantly residential, consisting of detached dwellings within the low-medium density residential zoning district. Immediately to the south of the subject property is the Lila Davis Elementary School, which is also in the institutional zoning district, as well as to the northwest of the subject property is the Northwood Presbyterian Church, and that is also in the institutional zoning district. The existing parcel will be platted. So it was previously unplatted, and what this will do is it's twofold. It is now going to officially give each lot a plat reference, as well as there was a condition of approval under the prior level 2, and that was for a unity of title. And so this will now release the unity of title. The parcel number 1, which is shown on the screen as lot 1, that will be retained by Heritage United Methodist Church, and it will be 3.95 acres. And parcel 2 to the south is the subject property site, which will be redeveloped from the existing church school into a medical clinic. A medical clinic is a minimum standard permitted use in the institutional zoning district. Moving on, the existing property survey is being shown to give you a point of reference to what the site looks like now and the access drive that runs along the northern edge of the subject property. That access drive will remain. It will also be maintained so that the neighboring properties to the north, Heritage UMC as well as Northwood Presbyterian, will be able to maintain access to that. One of the major differences with the proposed project is, you will see now the site plan, the access to Landmark Drive is going to be shifted slightly to the south, so it lines up with Haverford Drive, which is immediately to the east. Haverford Drive goes into the residential area. And what this will do is create a better access point, and that is something that our traffic engineering folks will be able to speak to. And I don't know if, Omar, do you want to come up right now to...
So as part of our review, this is a development that required a traffic impact study, and as part of the traffic impact study, a methodology report was required to be submitted by the consultant. This was reviewed and approved, and a traffic study was completed. And we are at the city accepting the revised traffic impact study after it was submitted. And one of the comments was to realign access of the development to that street to provide better visibility, safer maneuverability at that intersection. That intersection is close to a signalized intersection, which is on State Route 580 and Landmark Drive. So left-hand movement will have the opportunity to access into the private development and into the neighborhood. The city will definitely monitor that intersection for future safety concerns if there is anything. But we see currently the proposal as submitted is acceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. So the site plan that is on the screen right now shows the proposed changes to the site, which includes expansion of the parking area on both the east side and west side of the building. On the east side of the building, there will be a total of 42 parking spaces. On the west side of the building, there will be a total of 98 parking spaces, which comes to the total of 140 spaces on the subject property. The cross-access and shared parking agreement will enable users of this property, as well as Heritage United Methodist Church, where there are approximately 155 parking spaces, that they will be able to use each other's parking lots as they see fit. The proposed medical clinic is going to be Advanced Urology Institute, and of course they operate normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and they do not have overnight capacity. They do mostly, doctor visits and minor outpatient procedures. So the parking will be available to the church on the weekends when predominantly they may need to have additional spaces. Likewise, the proposed use will be operating Monday through Friday when predominantly the church property will not be necessarily as busy. So the two will be able to benefit from one another. One of the other improvements that they are going to do is provide a covered drop-off point along the north side of the building, and that will be designed to blend in with the architecture of the existing building. They are also proposing to provide extensive landscaping. The code requires landscape buffers along property lines, and the requirement along the east property line along Landmark Drive, the buffer will be expanded to 15 feet in width, which is what the code requires. The property line along the south and along the west will each have a buffer. The south property line requires a 5-foot buffer, and that is what they're providing. And the west property line will have a 10-foot buffer, and that is what the code requires. They submitted a comprehensive landscape program application simply for the fact that their northern property line is encumbered with that existing access drive. So they cannot physically provide the required landscaping within that area. The comp landscaping application allows them to take that, what would be a 5-foot required buffer, amounting to just under 3,000 square feet of landscaping, and they are going to incorporate that throughout the remainder of the site. In addition to the vehicular cross-access, there is a pedestrian cross-access that provides a connection between the subject property and the Lila Davis Elementary School to the south. And the applicant has agreed to improve that and align it with their proposed site, providing a crosswalk where necessary as it crosses over an internal drive aisle. And I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
A presentation by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Clearwater Sargent. I'm an engineer and principal with Gulf Coast Consulting. We are the applicants for the Heritage United Methodist Church on the plat and also Adventurology for the site. Melissa did a great presentation. I don't want to use up too much time, but just kind of go through some bullet points.
Mr. Chair, do we need to qualify him as an expert witness?
Applicant.
That's up to the applicant,
He's an applicant.
in my view. Mr. Pergolesi has been qualified before the board on multiple occasions. My recollection is.
I have brought
has as
resumes
well.
if you guys want to look at the resumes.
I'll hand your resume.
Okay.
Robert.
Thank you.
You're requesting to be recognized as an expert witness in the case?
Yes.
Civil engineering.
On what subject matters?
Civil engineering.
Site development, land development, drainage.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve Mr. Kazhozyan as a expert witness on the subject matters proposed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's go for it. Thank you.
Right, so some of the bullet points, just want to go quickly over. Just, we will be replacing the private school that is on the Heritage United Methodist Church campus with a medical clinic office. The church is selling the southern 4.68 acres for Adventurology Institute to operate a medical clinic office. The entire property has institutional land use and institutional zoning and will remain as such. The medical clinic office is a permitted use in the institutional zoning district. We will be improving the site by increasing the landscape buffer on the west boundary adjacent to the residential and adding parking in the center of the site. We will also be increasing the size of the drainage retention pond on the east end of the site and realigning the driveway with Haverford Drive to create a four-way intersection as suggested by city staff, and this is just good access management. We will be using the existing building, so the building setbacks are very large. We're providing 140 parking spaces on site, which exceeds the 106 spaces necessary per the ITE calcs in the parking assessment that was provided. So we just request your approval and recommendation from staff, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you. Did you have any?
Good afternoon, Robert Pergolesi, principal with Gulf Coast Consulting, and I've been recognized by the board as an expert in land use planning and transportation planning for 20 years now, so interesting. I'm just going to talk a little bit about traffic. As Clearwater mentioned and Melissa mentioned, replacing the private school with medical clinic. As you've heard before, we're realigning the driveway to align with Haverford Drive as suggested by your staff, which removed the existing offset and creates a safer intersection. Right now, these intersections are about 60 or 70 feet apart, so you got left turns crossing each other. As Omar suggested, we're aligning the driveways, which is Access Management 101. We conducted a detailed traffic study as required by staff for AM and PM peak periods. The side driveways, we did counts at the side driveways and nearby intersections, up at the signal at 580, all the way down to the signal at Enterprise. All the intersections operate at level service D during, or better during peak hours. and the adjacent segment of Landmark Drive operates at a level of service D during peak hours. I know that you received a letter in your packet from someone on Haverford Drive that was objecting regarding traffic, which is why I'm stating this on the record. Our project impacts for ITE trip generation 11th edition rates for medical office, 1,180 daily trips, 102 AM peak hour, 129 PM peak hour. So during your peak hour, you're looking at 2 cars a minute. And it's quite a lot different than a surge you get at a school when mom and dad drop their child off in the morning and then pick them up in the afternoon. You get these surges, so that wouldn't be there. This is not a significant traffic impact on a 4-lane roadway. We analyzed the future conditions upon the opening and then even 5 years beyond the opening as Mr. Atala required, and we would still be at level of service D or better at the intersections and level of service D on Landmark Drive. So Precor and I are here to answer any questions. We did speak with the pastor of Northwood Presbyterian. He has an access easement that runs along the driveway into the back end of his church. That's where he is. And that access easement will remain. It'll just be realigned with the new driveway, so he'll continue to have access. And that's a requirement of the final plat, which would have to be approved by City Council this summer. So we've assured him that he's going to continue to have that access.
That realignment's just at the intersection, correct?
Yep, and then it realigns. Is that the site plan? Here, I'll make it simple.
Right.
We realign at the intersection, and we cut right back up, and we join the existing alignment, about 100 feet into the property.
Anything else at this time?
Is there a condition in the approvals for the operating times of this business relative to the churches?
I don't know if it's a condition of approval, but I'll check the staff report. It's Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 for Advanced Urology Institute. And then the church is weekends, so.
That's not written in anything.
I don't believe it is, but let me check the staff report. And actually, we did a parking assessment using ITE parking generation. Our parking requirement per ITE is actually 106 parking spaces, and we've got 140 on our site. But the code requirement is 164, which is why we're in for parking. We feel we have more than enough parking on our site without having to use the church parking during the weekdays. But
But it is a cross-parking agreement
It's
that
a
is
cross-parking
between the two
agreement.
parties have agreed to.
yes,
Yes.
yes, the church and the buyers, Advanced Urology Institute.
Has that been, well, that's not been reported yet?
No, it would be.
Yeah.
It would be recorded with the plat, it'd be on the plat.
Okay.
Is there anything else at this time? If not, we'll move on to presentations with persons with party status. Mr. Kerbin?
Get that, the diagram of the property back on the screen just to help. Sure. Thank you. I've been pastor there for 17 years now.
Just state your name once more time for the
Chris
clerk.
Kerbin, C-U-R-V-I-N. I've been pastor there for 17 years at Northwood Presbyterian Church, and I guess it was about a decade ago, Heritage proposed the education building that you see now that's going to be converted. At that time, we had a number of meetings. We did not feel there was enough parking available for the traffic and the footprint of the building on that property. At that time, they asked for the easement road to be moved along the Lila Davis property to the south there.
You could point to the screen there, it'll come on up then if you... And
This is where it was proposed to be moved from here to come here and around to us to come to our church
that's your property there to the...
here.
Okay.
That was denied by the city at that point because they felt there was too much traffic with children coming over for after-school programs to both of these campuses. We have two, we have a preschool and an after-school program here. And so the access road was denied moving, and so we've lived with this for a number of years. Now that this is going to be added, what I wanted to add, to request, to be orderly about this, is to, again, to be given party status to the declaration for rights to the ingress and egress in the document that's been written for the declaration between those two parcels, that we be added to the third party for rights and entitlements to that ingress and egress. Left out of the current document that's proposed.
So you have, am I looking at that right now, just for clarity, you have an ingress-egress agreement through would be your south property line, is that right? Is that a drive there to that property existing?
Yes, we have the,
Yeah, it'd be easier just to point to it, I think, but if you wouldn't mind.
well, that's the warranty deed to this piece here.
Yeah. So that's, okay. So you have access to that right now?
That's correct, but we're not in any of the documents that are presented, like the declaration of agreement between the two parcels for ingress and egress. We'd like to be added to that just to ensure we have rights to that in the discussions in the future.
I advise the board, this board has the ability to receive Mr. Kervin as a party status
But we can't.
relative to this application, but in terms of private agreements, real estate deeds, easements, the board has no ability to do that. I would certainly urge Mr. Kervin or the others to obtain legal representation if that's desired, so they can work it out amongst themselves, but this board doesn't have any authority or jurisdiction to intrude into those agreements.
I was given notice about 10 days, 2 weeks ago for the meeting, and so I was out of town last week, but
It's not a function of your ability to be here and speak. The board doesn't have the ability to open up a private agreement for access or anything else and make you a party to it.
No.
The board's authority, they are very powerful people, but it doesn't extend quite that far.
And my comment back to this, it's not a matter of the power issue, it's a matter of the property, the access is currently, the ingress, egress is deeded to Westminster Presbytery, which is our adjudicatory Northwood Presbyterian Church, so we already have the legal right for that. So why can't it be added to the documents is my only concern.
It probably can be added to the documents, but this board hasn't the authority to add anything to those documents.
I would think the parties that are here are aware of this if they weren't already, and we may have some comment on them coming back when they rebut back up here on that.
Okay, so I mentioned the ingress, egress, but what happens in the past 10 years, what we have seen with the new building, is when the elementary school empties out, and this is both when it opens in the morning and exits, or
Right.
school ends every day, all the property backs up here, and we have a lot of traffic that comes only this way because this comes up to the stoplight. It only goes east, so people come here, they come around, they park here, and get their children through access here. This also happens in the morning. People cut through in order to park here to walk their children to school because there's so much traffic. We're a 7-day-a-week church, and so it also happens when we have big events, our parking fills up in this area. What we found in practice is this area is often used for both parking by staff in the school and for events. There is parking here. And so we're not entered into the agreement for parking, but I just kind of wonder what sort of problem is being created when this becomes a new easement road for these two parties. Because this is the only exit out. You can't get out the other way. You have to come through Northwood. Our major playground for children is right by the road that comes through. So I foresee, having been there this length of time, there's going to be a lot of traffic that will obviously find their exit this direction, not this direction. It's just easier to come out this way. So I'm surprised it's not been included in the discussion because this is the biggest impact it has on all three properties, is the exit and the entrance to the medical clinic.
Do they have cross easement agreements along on your property?
No.
They don't? But they're using your drive?
No, because we have signed, we are good neighbors. We have been good neighbors for many years. We've been there 35 years, and they've been there about the same length of time. But we respect each other's property, we don't park in each other's parking for events. We have exact worship times on Sunday and other events during the week, and concerts too many to mention. So this is needed parking for us. We're not in an agreement with the medical clinic for this to be used. So how will we prevent the exiting of all that traffic and the parking there? I mean, this is the easiest parking space to get here.
Right. Well,
This is the main door here. This is the covered parking, I would imagine, to the new site here. I just think there needs to be a plan to how to prevent this to become a major entrance and exit. It happens now. We have a stop sign we placed on our property about here, and people just blow through it to come pick up their children for school.
well, I can't give you legal advice on that, but if somebody doesn't have an ingress-egress easement, they don't have the right to drive across your property. I mean, and you got to look into enforcement. Unfortunately, this board doesn't have the authority that I know of to enforce anything like that, but
Well, would this be a reason to postpone this meeting until you have a full board and I have an attorney present? Or we have to come back and appeal this later? I just want to stop the bleeding of the traffic before it begins
Jay, you want to
and
go?
have a single conversation with someone about parking that should have been in the plan to begin with.
Well, yeah.
It's been left out.
The only thing I could say to that is that your church property, the property there is not part of the application itself, and correct me if I say something wrong, Jay, please, but whether your ingress and egress easement agreement gives you just the unilateral right to that driveway to get to Landmark Drive, or if it's crossed back and forth, I'm not privy to it, or the board isn't either. So I think that would be something, maybe the applicant will address that when he does come back up here, unless you wanted him to do it now, I mean. I don't have to be-
Now is fine, but you haven't gone wrong yet.
Okay, thank you.
But my understanding is anything can be done to the easement road pending putting a fence up, that we have ingress and egress. We have the ability to go in and out 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, so that's not debated.
You could probably put speed tables up,
Is
you
that-
could do all kinds of deterrents.
I don't know the nature of your agreement. Is it cross easement by both directions? Do they have rights to it as well because it's a
Said no.
cross easement?
Heritage does to this here.
Okay.
But that's their property.
But not on your property.
No.
Okay. So,
I don't know if they were aware of this or not. This may be new news. I don't know.
This is first I'm hearing this. Okay. Robert Pergolizzi, for the record. Okay. We are self-contained. We have parking on our property for the amount of parking we would generate for the medical clinic to meet ITE standards. To meet city standards, we would be using parking from the owner of our parcel, Heritage United Methodist Church.
Correct.
We have no intention nor right to be using the parking of the great pastor here on Northwood Presbyterian Church. Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, there's an access easement, and we are going to continue to maintain that access easement as I testified. And as far as Northwood Presbyterian being part of an agreement with Heritage United Methodist Church and the Advanced Urology Institute, they can do that as a private agreement, and we have no objection. We will certainly recommend to our client to go ahead and do that. And as Mr. Daniel stated, it's not anything the board can be concerned with. So I assure the pastor that we will work with him on cross-access and continuing to provide him his access as I've testified here today.
yeah, thank you.
Is that on your plat? His easement,
Excuse me?
is his easement on your plat?
It's going to be, yeah. It has to be.
His easement is a perpetual easement to his property on that roadway. That's as I'm understanding it, because of
Right.
the warranty deed.
It
He's
allows-
referencing that.
It allows them to get out to Landmark.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So he already has that in place?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's
Yeah.
used.
Yep, okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I know we jumped ahead here a little bit. Cross-examination of witnesses by planning and development.
No cross.
Thank you. Cross-examination witnesses by the applicant. Cross-examination by party status. Mr. Kervin, if you wanted to ask any particular questions to either. We'll now open this to comments by the public. You have 3 minutes. If there's anybody that wishes to speak on this, come forward, state your name and address for the clerk. Is there anybody on this subject?
Good afternoon. My name is Rudy Michalek. Last name is spelled M-I-C-H-A-L-E-K. In looking at the diagram that was just up here, it appears that the church has an exit onto the major thoroughfare, 580. And people coming from the west can easily access that entrance. But anybody who would be coming from the east appears to have to go around the medium and make a big U-turn if they want to come into the 580 entrance. And as such, the entrance that's on the road that runs north and south provides them the opportunity to come in from that southern part or this area that's now under review. And so it would seem practical that if the ingress-egress is not in place for the church, at this point in time, that should be resolved first before approval for this program, which may eliminate their entrance from the south part of the property. And as was mentioned by the minister, is that the people have a tendency to go from the south through the property to exit onto 580. So I would just like to make that mention of concern about ingress-egress being resolved first before there's actually a vote, and that the vote be deferred to a full board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, board members. My name is Brian Ungst, 2251 Lauren Lane. I live about a mile from the site. I'm a proud 1989 alumni of the Growing Place. My son, Bruce, just graduated from there on Friday. Very familiar with the layout and the concerns that pastor from Northwood Presbyterian Church mentioned. Also, as you know, in my day job, I do land use planning as an attorney. And I can tell you that you've got competent substantial evidence from not just Mr. Pergolizzi, but also Mr. Atala. And it sounds like any of the concerns the pastor has are private party concerns that can be addressed by the parties. And I know they'll do that in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public? At this time, we'll close that. And closing remarks by planning and development?
We don't have any closing remarks.
Thank you. Closing remarks by anybody with party status. Mr. Kerbin, would you like to close with anything? Any closing remark?
I guess to thank you for your time, and I do think more needs to be done and thought through, and we'll certainly hire some representative to work toward that. I'm just concerned with the increased traffic that you have a preschool program and a before and after school program on our property, the Growing Place preschool on Heritage's property, and now we've added more business in the middle of Lila Davis Elementary. And this easement road was proposed to be moved about 10 years ago, and it was declined because of the concern for children coming from Lila Davis to these two programs. I understand the pathway that had been created, but that was the concern 10 years ago, and it wasn't approved.
Have you met with the applicant or the...
I don't know who they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously. Okay. Thank you.
So I think it needs to be done.
At this time, we'll have closing of the public hearing and discussion and vote by the board. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I could speak previously too. I'm sorry. I just want to echo a little bit too. And I feel everything that you're saying, but I do think it was represented that what you're talking about is a private matter and it's nothing that the board has the authority to approve or disapprove on it, unfortunately. I wish we could resolve it here today. But the parties that are a part of it are here in this room, and you have access to their names and contact number and information, and hopefully they would reach out to you to resolve this issue. Obviously, with little knowledge that I do have, if you've got legal rights to an ingress-egress agreement, they can't unilaterally change that I know of. But I'm not a judge and jury on that, so anybody else have any comment? But
I don't think so.
is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve case number FLD 2009-02002A and PLT 2023-03002, 2680 Landmark Drive. Based on the evidence and testimony presented in the application, the staff report, and at today's hearing, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with conditions of approval as listed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Okay. Our next case, thank you. Our next case is item number 2, FLD 2022-12030, 869 Bruce Avenue. The owner is Robert Engel, Representative Brian Ungst Jr., Esquire, McFarland, Ferguson, and McMullen. Location is 0.176 acre property is located on the east side of Bruce Avenue, approximately 250 feet south of the Kipling Plaza and Bruce Avenue intersection. The Community Development Board is reviewing an application for 2 detached dwellings and a termination of status as a nonconformity for density for 2 detached dwelling units, where the maximum permitted density is 1 detached dwelling unit in the medium-density residential district for the property located at 869 Bruce Avenue. The project includes 4 off-street parking spaces and requests allowable flexibility from termination of status as a nonconformity for density and allowable reduction to setback requirements. Associations, Clearwater Neighborhoods Coalition, Board of County Commissioners, Pinellas County School Board, Clearwater Beach Association. Signed planner is Mark T. Perry, Senior Planner. We'll now have the presentation by planning, is anyone that wishes to request party status on this case? Seeing none, we'll have a presentation in planning and development staff.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I'd ask that the board accept Mr. Mark Perry as an expert witness in general planning, zoning, redevelopment planning, land development, and land development code amendments, special area plans and overlay districts, site plan review, landscape architecture, and all other matters he is about to testify hereon.
Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve Mr. Perry as an expert witness on the subject matters proposed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Perry.
Thank you. Mark Perry, Planning and Development. The site is located on the east side of Bruce Avenue. It's within the LMDR zoning district and the residential urban future land use plan classification, which allows 7.5 dwelling units per acre or 1 dwelling unit as permitted as a matter of right for the subject site. The .176 acre site has been developed with 2 single-family detached dwellings, single-story detached dwellings. Staff conducted extensive research into the history of the site. However, due to the age of the development, some of the permit details remain unclear. The first dwelling constructed on the site is located on the west side of the site, and it was constructed sometime around 1935. The second structure, located on the east side of the site, was permitted around 1947. There is no evidence that the second structure was ever legally constructed as a dwelling unit. The code at the time of construction of the second structure in the 1940s appeared to designate the property as R1. However, the permitted density was not detailed in the code itself. However, by the 1970s, the property was designated as RS50. The permitted density at that time was 8.7 units an acre, which for this size property allows 1 dwelling unit. Again, though there are permits for the structures in our records, there is no evidence that the second structure was legally established as a dwelling unit. The Pinellas County property appraiser records indicate that this block, this general area, was developed between the 1930s and the 1970s. Nearly all of the properties in the area include 1 detached dwelling. The subject property in the surrounding area is also within the coastal storm area. The immediate area is characterized by lots containing a single detached dwelling. So the proposal is the demolition of all the structures on the site and reconstruction of the two dwelling units. Again, only one dwelling unit is permitted as a matter of right. The buildings are proposed to be 3 stories in height. The proposal includes 2 separate components. The request includes a reduction in the front setback. And the second part is a request for termination of status of nonconformity to permit 2 dwelling units where one is otherwise permitted as a matter of right. The second component is needed for the reconstruction of the 2 existing dwelling units. To be clear, the primary point of disagreement has to do with the termination of status of nonconformity. The proposal is inconsistent with several provisions of the comprehensive plan, including Table A1, which lists that the permitted density of 7.5 units per acre, where over 11 units per acre are proposed. 1 dwelling unit is allowed as a matter of right. The plan is also very clear that permanent population densities in the coastal storm area shall not be increased. This is also consistent with the countywide rules. The plan requires that development should maintain and support the existing character of the neighborhood. The proposal is inconsistent with the purpose and intent of the Community Development Code, which requires that the development not have any negative impacts on the value of surrounding properties, that it reflect the existing and desirable characteristics of the neighborhood, that it set appropriate densities, and protect the character of the area. The nonconformity provisions provide that it's not the intent to encourage nonconformities to continue, but rather to be brought into compliance with the code. Now, there is a provision by which the status of an existing nonconformity may be terminated, essentially being considered conforming. However, the proposal has to meet a series of litmus tests. In this case, the one applicable litmus test is that it is consistent with the general applicability criteria. And the proposal is inconsistent with those general applicability criteria in that the nearly doubling of density is not in harmony with the density of adjacent properties or the surrounding community. Staff went ahead and looked at the immediate area, which is kind of highlighted by all the dots. And we found, based on city records, that 94% of those properties comply with density requirements. We then took it a step further, and we looked at all of the properties zoned low-medium density residential from Acacia Street north. And we found that the pattern of development with regard to density was nearly identical. 96% of the properties comply with density requirements. Staff also found that the average lot size in the overall area, again, from Acacia Street north, is 0.187 acres, where the subject site is 0.176 acres. It's essentially average. It's an average size lot for the area. In summary, the primary question is this: is the termination of status of nonconformity, doubling the otherwise permitted number of dwelling units, in harmony with the density of adjacent properties in which it is located and consistent with the community character of the immediate vicinity? So these are some facts. The lot is average size for the community. Nearly all the properties in the area are conforming with regard to density. There is no record for a termination of status of nonconformity approved in this area. There is no evidence that the 2 units were ever legally permitted. The termination of status of nonconformity require that all Level 1 and Level 2 applications be consistent with the general applicability criteria, and these have not been met. The proposal would increase the density within the coastal storm area, which is prohibited by the comprehensive plan. The development is inconsistent with the existing pattern of development in the surrounding neighborhood. It's inconsistent with the general purpose of the Community Development Code. It's inconsistent with the general applicability. It's also inconsistent with the requirement for the submittal of substantial competent evidence, also required by the Community Development Code. And finally, the proposal is inconsistent with applicable portions of the comprehensive plan. Therefore, staff must recommend denial of the case FLD 2022-12030. If there are any questions that I can try to answer, I'd be happy to.
Anybody at this time?
Not this time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Presentation by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to hand out some resumes for your consideration as certification for expert witnesses.
Thank you.
So before I start my time, Mr. Chair and board members, again, Brian Unks, 625 Court Street, this time using my professional address and not my personal address, on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Engel, newlyweds who are here with us today. I'd like to first ask you to certify Mr. Robert Pergolesi, AICP, PTP, as both an expert in planning and transportation planning, and his resume is the first item in the packet of information I just handed out.
I have a motion.
Move to approve.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nope.
No, approved.
All approved. Move too fast.
And secondly, Mr. Michael Nolan, who is the second resume in your packet. PE is a civil engineer and developed the site plan, so I'd ask you to certify him as an expert witness in civil engineering and site plan related issues, including potential drainage or other issues related to site plan design.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And I've got a PowerPoint, I'm trying to set this up as a full screen here. Let's see. All right, there we go, I actually did it. And prior to starting my time again, we also have Mr. Jeremy Stevens, who is a residential designer. He is not an architect, so I'm just tendering him as a fact witness if you have any questions about the elevations. And with that, we're ready to begin. So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is Brian Unxt again. We are here asking for the board to approve a level 2 approval to terminate an existing nonconformity as to density. Something that's extremely important to point out is we are not asking to increase density in the CSA. That density is there and has been there and has been permitted by the city since the 1940s, since 1947. There are 3 structures that currently exist. What we're doing is we're decreasing the footprint of an existing nonconformity, which is exactly what the termination of nonconformity provision was meant for in your code. In the packet, I have 2 very important pieces of your code for you to look at when you have time. One are the actual approval criteria for terminating a nonconformity. I have never seen a termination of nonconformity application not granted. Termination of nonconformity was put into your code in 1999 to protect existing property rights. Section K of your comprehensive plan specifically addresses protecting property rights and making sure that property rights, including the right of a property owner to use, maintain, develop, and approve his or her property, are part of land use decisions. So those are 2 very important areas for you to look at. Respectfully, the only disagreement we have with staff is whether we meet the criteria for approval of the nonconforming uses which have been there. When I say it's been permitted, these business tax receipts have been issued by the city, including one in 2022 for 2 dwelling units. That's in the application. So currently, this property has a business tax receipt for 2 dwelling units. It also has 2 addresses from the U.S. Postal Service, parcel A and parcel B. So what we're doing is taking non-code compliant structures that are unsafe, that are flood prone, that don't drain properly, and we're bringing them up to code, increasing the property values, increasing the tax base within the neighborhood, consistent with the new development that has been developed in the neighborhood, and simply allowing the Ingalls to use, for a single-family use, the 2 dwelling units that they purchased. When they bought the property, they met with the staff, and the staff sent them the application and said, you can apply to terminate a nonconformity. When they hired me, I said, this will be easy, you've already talked to the staff. And unfortunately, here we are with our respectful disagreement. They have a large family. They have 3 adult children each, so 6 total, and the purpose of the 2 dwelling units is to allow for their 2 families to live together on the same single family property. So what we're doing is we're increasing the existing front setback from 5.4 feet to 18 feet. We're increasing the existing rear setback from 4 feet to 10. We're increasing the existing side setback on the north from 1.6 feet to 9. And we're increasing the side setback on the south from 4 feet to 8.35, all of which comply with code, with the exception of the 18-foot front, which staff does not object to, which staff could approve as a level 1 approval. This is the site plan. I'm going to let Mr. Pergolizzi talk more about this. I want to show you the existing conditions. These are the 3 structures with the current setbacks that are non-conforming, right up against the other properties, and look at the property directly behind our property. It's a 3-story home. What we're proposing is consistent with all of the new development patterns in the neighborhood. And there's an accessory structure that's just inches off our property. So what we're doing is increasing the setback, decreasing the footprint of an existing nonconformity, which is entirely the point of protecting the existing density that was allowed for hotels, condos. I even, Mr. Chair, received a termination of nonconformity for a mobile home park from this board in 2020. So we allowed a mobile home park to have 113 units in perpetuity to be able to redevelop those when only 89 are allowed, but we don't want to let Mr. and Mrs. Engel use the 2 units that have been there since 1947 and build a beautiful, beautiful home. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Pergolizzi.
Good afternoon, board members. Robert Pergolizzi with Gulf Coast Consulting. I just wanted to use this machine here for the aerial photograph. As Brian mentioned, we're looking to reestablish 2 single-family detached homes on the property. The lot is slightly wider than most of the lots. It has 66.8 feet of frontage, where most other lots in the area have only 50 to 60 feet of frontage. The property currently has 2 residential units, a primary residence in front and a secondary residence in the rear of the lot. So we are not increasing the density. It already exists. And we meet the requirements for the termination of the nonconformity as Mr. Ongst explained. The existing structures were constructed well before any FEMA regulations went into effect, and the FEMA flood zone is AE9. The site's at 3.1 feet above sea level ground, so this would be inundated with 6 feet of water if we got a 100-year storm. And yes, it is in the coastal high hazard area, hurricane evacuation zone A. Most of the homes in the neighborhood were developed in the 1950s and 1960s prior to FEMA regulations. So we see this as a public safety problem with the existing neighborhood, because if we ever got that 100-year flood, this entire neighborhood would be wiped out, under 6 feet of water. The surrounding neighborhood consists of older, smaller, single-family detached homes with a few newer, larger homes that include 2- and 3-story structures that are starting to crop up in the area in complete compliance with FEMA floodplain standards. The ground level is nothing but garage and storage space, because that's really all it can be, and that's what we're proposing here. It's anticipated that several properties in the area will redevelop and will remove the older 1-story homes and rebuild new 2- and 3-story homes that comply with FEMA requirements. So the Ingalls here are being proactive in reconstructing above the base flood elevation for safety. I'll turn to our plan. Well, there's the survey showing the existing setbacks and our site plan here. Again, redeveloping into 2 detached dwelling units will contain landscaping, buildings that comply with current building codes, and building setbacks that comply with the LMDR standards, with the exception of the front setback, which is currently only 5.4 feet, as you saw on the aerial, to 18 feet, where 25 feet is the requirement. And as Brian stated, and the staff report states, they have no objection to the 18-foot front setback. There's plenty of precedent. So we have an 18-foot front setback, which allows parking for cars in the driveway, as well as in the garage. We have a side setback on the north. The requirement is 5 feet. We got 8.96 feet. The side setback on the south, 4 feet exists. The requirement is 5 feet. We've got 8.35 feet. And then the rear setback is 10 feet, meeting the code minimum requirement. Okay. The emerging character of this area is to demolish the old non-FEMA compliant homes and reconstruct with newer, larger homes. I want to go to a comparative development.
If you could put the PowerPoint up, please. Stop our clock for a second. That would be great. Thank you. This is probably better on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay. Thank you.
So as of right construction, we developed this concept layout as to what could be built on this property in full compliance with the code. As you see, we've got a front setback of 25 feet, a side setback of only 5 feet, and a rear setback of 10 feet. And we are not exceeding the 65% ISR, and the maximum height 30 feet above design flood elevation, which would be 38 feet above the ground. It could be built with only 5-foot setbacks. The light brown area shows a building footprint of 4,400 square feet and could be developed 3 stories. So essentially, they could do a 3-story box with the ground floor being 4,400 square feet of garage and storage, and then a second and third floor each being 4,400 square feet each, for a total of 8,800 square feet of living area, a gross building area of 13,200. By contrast, on our site plan, if you want to go to the site plan, we feel we've got a much better plan with a landscape courtyard and pool area and open deck, larger setbacks than what is required, total air-conditioned areas on the second and third floor of only 4,170 feet, and total building area of 7,300 square feet, including the garages on the lower levels,
And
which
Mr.
was much better.
In
Thank you.
your expert opinion as a planner, does this meet all of the criteria for approval of the termination of nonconformity under the Community Development Code?
Yes, it does.
And does it comply with the comprehensive plan, the goals and objectives and policies of the city of Clearwater?
Yes, it does. We're not increasing the density.
Mr. Engel, if you'd like to introduce yourself for 30 seconds.
Bob Engel, I-N-G-L-E. My wife Cheryl, we just got married. Family of 6, 3 grandchildren, gonna grow a lot more. Brought them in a long time ago. We lived Clearwater, single parent, raising my kids. We wanted this house. I want to have my children have a house near our facility, and we've done that. With this, that's why we bought the property. 2 houses, because when they get married so far, 2 of them have lived with us, and we let them now not pay any rent, and I know I gotta go.
Thank you.
But it's for our family and to keep the kids with us and growing.
Thank you. So in brief, we believe we provided competent substantial evidence to give the board a basis to respectfully disagree with the staff and approve the termination of the non-conforming density, which has been permitted for years, just as you would for any hotel developer and any condo that has ever come before you and asked for termination of non-conformity. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have cross-examination by planning and development, if there's any.
The city would like to ask Mr. Pergolesi a couple questions.
Please, Mr. Pergolesi.
Mr. Pergolesi, you said with this proposed application that we're not increasing the density, correct?
I did.
So how many dwelling units were allowed under the code in 1970 for this particular property, based on the code requirements?
70? Oh, I don't know that, but I know that there were 2 existing dwelling units on the property prior to 1970.
But the 1970 code, you're not aware of what those requirements were?
No.
Could I ask that question of Mr. Perry briefly, just to add some additional information to this inquiry?
Mr. Daniel, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Chair, cross-examination is obviously for adverse witnesses, so if the city wants to redirect and ask their own witnesses questions, I want to do the same thing with my witnesses.
Jay?
That would be the rule in a court of law. As you know, we are not in a court of law, so here we're required to observe the fundamental principles of due process. I do agree with Mr. Unks that if you're going to permit the cross-examination of the city's own witnesses, that you permit Mr. Unks to likewise examine Mr. Perry on those topics. Really the board's decision as to whether they wish to go down that road or not. I try to be as unhelpful as I can to you. I would suggest to you either not permitting it at all or permitting it under the circumstances where both parties are permitted that.
I think that's agreeable.
For both.
He can ask those questions.
We'll allow both. Ross. Go ahead.
Mr. Perry, could you reiterate again how much density was permitted on that property per the 1970 code?
Yeah, we looked at the 1976 code, and it was 8.7 units per acre, which multiplied by this acreage allows one dwelling unit.
Thank you. Mr. Pergolesi, I have just one follow-up question. Do you know what the permitted density is for this property per the code currently as it stands?
1 unit.
Okay. So then, that would be an increase in density essentially per the code requirements, not per the nonconformity, because the code requires 1 unit, correct?
Right, and it is my understanding that's the purpose of the termination of the nonconformity.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Planning and development, is that it? Are we
No further cross.
applicant?
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Perry just a couple questions. Mr. Perry, thank you for your report. It was very thoughtful and thorough. I just want to reiterate, in terms of your report, the staff is not objecting to the footprint of any of the structures that are being proposed. I'm sorry, sir. Yeah, that'd be great. Footprint of any of the structures that are proposed on the site plan. The only objection is that that rear unit is considered a dwelling unit instead of an accessory structure. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the only point of disagreement is the termination of status of nonconformity component. So it's not the form, that's the issue.
Right. And single-family use is permitted in the MDR zoning district?
LMDR.
LMDR, yes. And in your staff report, you say that the staff is not contesting or contending that the termination of nonconformity section of the code is not available to single-family homeowners or people in the LMDR. Is that correct?
Correct. That's why I was offered to the applicant. They asked if there was an avenue that they could proceed, and the answer is yes, there is.
Thank you. And I think we provided in the application, but you're aware that the city has issued business tax receipt licenses, including in 2022, for the operation of 2 dwelling units on the site. Is that correct?
That's correct. The business tax receipt is a taxing mechanism, not an element of permission or non-permission. It's merely a taxing mechanism.
And just one other thing, well, maybe a couple others, but the proposed building height is 26 feet above developable flood elevation, where it could go to a maximum of 30. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
And so do you agree that what is being proposed is less intense in terms of square footage, covered square footage, as opposed to what could be approved as of right without any approval by the board?
I don't know. I'd have to compare all the numbers, and quite frankly, for residential development, we don't look at floor area ratio. That's not a litmus test. It's intensity of use, and of course the setbacks and ISR and things like that. Off the cuff, if the applicant wanted to build a single-family home that met all the setbacks, ISR, height, all that, that would just go through as a permit.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, Mark. One moment, please. That concludes our cross-examination. I will not be redirecting my witness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now open this case to comments by the public. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Come up, state your name and address for the clerk, one at a time.
How do I stand up against that, fellas?
You can do fine.
Could you turn this on?
Yes, could you provide us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. David Hendrickson, HENDICKSON, 860 Bruce Avenue.
Thank you.
That's a picture of my side of the street where I live. See, all the houses are only one story. This is where the Ingalls proposed to build 2 homes that are 30 foot high. The house they showed behind their house is not a 3-story house. It is a 2-story house. That's number one. As far as they have an A and B address, but at that residence, there's only one electric meter and one water meter. So I don't see how there could be 2 separate homes there at any time. It might have been a rental of something, but it's not very big. And to be able to build that, and it just doesn't conform with the neighborhood. I mean, it might, it's an improvement if you want to say that, but our neighborhood is very quaint, quiet, everybody's, gets along. And I worry about, could this set a precedent for somebody else to do the same for rentals, which would really change the neighborhood. So I hope you will deny this, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is anybody else?
My name is Shirley Peterson, Petersen, and I reside at 861 Bruce Avenue. And I'm here today to ask you to deny the request for the 2-story home and the setting variance because it doesn't comply with the rest of the neighborhood. All the homes have the same setback, and all the homes are one resident, one dwelling on each property. And another concern I have is density. We have a major flooding problem on that street. It's a very low-lying area of Clearwater Beach. Whenever we get heavy rain, our streets and our yards flood and look like a lake. And sometimes the houses even flood. And I'm concerned that the density size of these homes will make the water that would normally flow into that property flow into the neighboring properties, causing them a problem. And my other concern is that they have plans for it to be all family and residential, but if 2 homes are allowed on that property, I'm concerned that investors will buy properties on the beach thinking to do the same and make it rentals. And we had a lot of trouble back in the 2006 or 7 with investors when there were a lot of properties for sale. They came out and bought them, and they didn't comply with the rental rules, and they would put like 10, 12 people in a house. There was all kinds of noise, partying, traffic. It was a disaster. And they refused to comply even when they were told about it. They had to go through the courts and the system. And I would hate to see that happen again. And now I've lost my place. So anyway, in conclusion, I'm asking that you say no and keep it single dwelling homes. And the settings of all the homes are exactly the same, and it would throw off the flow if that one were put closer up to the road, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
My name is Glenn Storr. I live on Lantana Avenue, which is the street over from this one.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
For those who are unaware of the area,
Sir, your name, please, again, she didn't hear.
the name is Storr, S-T-O-R-R.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn. The residential area of North Beach is very small. On the west side is predominantly high-rise buildings, homes to the very wealthy. On the right side, overlooking the Clearwater Channel, is basically higher-rise houses with equally expensive homes. The center section, which is very narrow, and narrows as it goes further north, and this property is in the northern section, excuse me. And it is very narrow and is mostly smaller homes in the 1,200 to 1,800, 1,900 square foot capacity. This particular home is a very small lot and a very small home that is proposed to be demolished. The only question and problem I have is density, which to me is people and the things that go along with people, in particular accommodation. The problem with these houses is that the streets that surround them are very narrow. They're the width of 2 automobiles at the most, including this one, Bruce. The problem is parking, which comes with the density of people. The problem is people are converting their garages, these small homes, into residential and doing away with their parking, so therefore parking on their entranceways to their garages in lieu of putting the car in the proper garage. This property apparently is going to be over the normal density of people that normally live in this area, which are single people. There are not many children around this area. There are middle-class people in this section, and they are basically not child-age people. The problem is they park. It is noticeable now, recently, in the last few years, that there are more and more parking problems in the area, to the extent that the police have put up items on the entranceway indicating no public parking. You cannot approach the beaches. You cannot park anywhere. It is for residential only. We have never seen anything like that before. It is getting to be a problem, and people are parking more and more. The more people, the more automobiles are parked on the streets, which do not accommodate in their width the parking. And also the access to their houses is getting limited and limited. And that's my only problem with
Thank
this.
you. Thank you.
John Sorelli, Cirelli, 865 Bruce Avenue. I'm the next door neighbor. I moved there, going to retire there hopefully soon, to enjoy life as a small-town beach neighborhood. All the houses are built in the 1950s, single family, and that's why I moved there. Is there a difference between MDR and LMDR? Because on this says MDR, and the expert over there showed the map and said LMDR. So would that affect anything with the density? Because on this proposal it says MDR. Number two, the pictures they showed on those houses are all N units, corner units. I'm pretty sure they're bigger lots, and they're one family. You know, as family members and everything, when I have kids, and you have parking, so you have 6 cars in the garage, like the show there, there's no way it's going to be happening. They're going to be parking on the street. Because they're going to say, move your car, because I got to move my car. And right now, like the gentleman over here said, the streets are getting crazy. When I go to the beach, there's no parking anymore. There used to be parking on the side streets. Now there's no parking there. So now they're moving to my block. Just yesterday, someone was on my block, on my grass, and they didn't want to move. I called the parking authority, and they said, as long as there's 2 tires on the street, they could park on my property. So what am I going to do? It doesn't make sense. So now with more people coming down, bigger houses, it is true, the streets are very narrow. On one of those pictures when they show the 6 cars, is there a sidewalk where I can walk? There is. All right. And of course you're an expert too, But I'm pretty sure if you were that neighbor, you're kind of, be a little different on your assumptions. It's ridiculous the size of these houses and the amount of people come. If there's a regulation, there's a law, it should stay like it is. That's why people move there, or stay there, or retire there. It happens one time, now there's a house next to it on the other side for sale. What happens if they want to build two houses, and so on and so on? It becomes like condo association, too many people. So I recommend that you vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Emily Haas, Haase. I actually live in one of the houses that they showed for the bigger corner houses, in a single-family dwelling with my daughter. We've been there and my son, my husband. We've been there for 10 years, and I don't see a problem with the making the house beautiful. We definitely should not stay as it is. It's kind of a dump as it is. Would love to have a pretty house 2 houses north of me, or 3 houses north of me, but I am opposed to the 2 structures on the unit, as that would set a precedent for other people to do that, and I'm concerned about the rentals as a family living in the neighborhood. That's it.
Thank you.
My name is Lori Cirelli, Cirelli, and I'm at 865 Bruce Avenue. And I just want to say that I support all of the feelings that my community neighbors feel, and hope that you vote no on this.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm William Johnson, 2694 Redford Court West in Clearwater. I observed that the staff report that goes along with this case is one of the best that I've seen, with 3 exceptions. One was already noticed. The first page of the staff report gives a reference to medium-density residential, although the rest of the staff report talks about LMDR, as does the zoning map. At the end of the report, there's a reference to photographic attachments, which were not included in the staff report that is available on the website. So it's uncertain what was intended there. 3, the application reports, this is the applicant's application, reports that they're requesting a deviation from the intensity requirements of the development code via residential infill project provision. A word search of the staff recommendation does not find the word infill. So therefore, I'd like to supplement the staff report with a submission of the additional information from the code defining residential infill. And that's what you have, and that's what's on the machine. It's when there is a unique condition of the property that could not otherwise be developed. I was unable to find in any submission by the applicant of any unique condition of this property. A unique condition that would prohibit it from being developed as a single detached home. So in accordance with Code Section 404, the burden of proof in a Level 2 case shall be upon the applicant to demonstrate to the Community Development Board, you you find people that all required criteria for approval are met, because there's no justification why it can't be used for a single-family home. I think the burden of proof is not met, and the application for additional density fails. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
My name is Andrea Brown, B-R-O-W-N. I live at 866 Bruce Avenue. It's a little bit right across the street from the said property. I just really think that if we allow this to happen, to have the two buildings on the property, that we're setting a precedent. And I know my other neighbors have already said this, but that really, really frightens me. Because what will wind up happening is that everybody's going to want to build two houses on their lots, and all of a sudden we've created density that could just double in the neighborhood. And that's scary to me. You know, these people say they want their children there, but what happens if their children aren't there? Okay, what happens if they decide to turn it into a rental properties? And all of a sudden we've got two giant party houses with a big pool in the center. Where does that leave us? Where does that leave the neighborhood, and where does that leave them? Are they just going to be okay and allowed to do that? Because that would really upset me tremendously. We have a very, very quiet street and a very quiet, beautiful neighborhood. About 2 weeks ago, I had the nice fortune of meeting a new homeowner who just bought on our street. And they said they just love the quiet of the street and the fact that they felt like when they came up and down the street, it felt like almost, like Ozzie and Harriet or Leave It to Beaver. It was just this really homey street with friendly, loving, caring people, neighbors such as the ones that you've had the great pleasure of meeting, my neighbors. Very happy with them. But I just fear that all of a sudden this is going to get out of hand, and all of a sudden it's going to be a nuisance, annoying, maybe people coming and going day and night. That would be just terrible. It's a beautiful, wonderful neighborhood that I hope we can keep the integrity of the residences, of the homeowners, of the density, and not increase density and set a precedent for others to come in and do the same. So I am hoping that you will deny the approval for these two structures, and thank you so much for all of your good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Rudy Michalek. Last name spelled M-I-C-H-A-L-E-K. Thank you. As we've heard from the various presentations, almost everything that comes before you talks about flexibility to something. And when I recently had a conversation with the then Mayor Hibbert, he informed me that when they moved to the term flexibility, the intention was a give and take on both parties. That the developer may get some things, but so would the neighborhood and so forth. That seems to have changed over a period of time where flexibility is only about, we should be able to have this additional item. Now, it was mentioned that last year there was the sales license. But I would question, was that just done last year, an oversight, just so it can be put on the record now of saying, see, it did exist? Mr. Perry was very clear in his comments that this property should be a one-density unit property, period. And I think that speaks to the fact that in the past, had there been simply misrepresentations of what in fact was going there, that misrepresentation should not be carried forward into the future as proof that therefore there was in fact two separate residents there, because we don't know that was the case. I think the layout by the architect is a very fine layout, but really speaks to the possibility of could this in fact be another rental unit that they're simply putting on the back when the rest of the family's not there, because it's a very big house, 4 bedrooms in the front, and I believe it is 3 bedrooms in the back. The other thing that I would say with regards to this is simply the city planning department laid out a very good analysis of the rules, regulations, and laws that were made in the past, and to the extent that those should be followed. So very clearly, this property should, in fact, be a one-density property. And I would ask that you disapprove this application and allow them to come back sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Hi, yes, my name is Linda Kubilius, Kubilius, and I'm at 945 Bruce Avenue. I'm actually up a few blocks from this place, but the most thing I am worried about is putting 2 pieces of property on that one land that's supposed to be one property. Because what's going to happen next, I'm worried about, is then what if somebody else wants to do this? Somebody else wants to do this, and I just think the neighborhood should stay as a one single property, not 2 on one. With the parking, that's another story. If you start putting 2 pieces of property, on just one piece of land, that's another thing too, because the parking right now is horrible. If you have a few friends over on the weekend, somebody parks on the other side of the street behind my driveway, somebody's here for me, I'm trying to get out. I mean, I actually got stuck at a neighbor's one time trying to get out. I could not get out. I had to wait till people came back from the beach to get out of her house when they had that mess down on Bruce Avenue. I don't know if anybody remembers it, but it was a mess. So I'm worried about the parking, and I would really like the neighborhood to have just one piece of property on the property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else at this time? Seeing none. We will go to closing remarks by Planning and Development staff.
First, one correction. The notice did have the incorrect zoning district. I guess I inadvertently got the L out of there. It is low, medium density residential. That has no impact whatsoever on the intensity of use. Okay. So it is low, medium density residential, has no impact on density. To answer a few questions and provide some clarifications on the applicant's presentation, I would assert that the request is indeed to increase the intensity of use. As I noted prior, a business tax receipt is just that. It's a taxing mechanism. It does not imply permission. It doesn't imply whether a use is permitted by the code or not. It's simply a taxing mechanism. If 2 units were indeed permitted as a matter of right, we would not be here today. There would be no nonconformity to fix, to request flexibility from. The reason that Mr. Onks has never processed a termination of status of nonconformity in this area, or that this board has not approved one, is that we have never received one. If the situations are different zoning district, not in the coastal storm area, we would have a different discussion, but we're talking about the context of this site and the existing circumstances. There is no evidence that 2 units were ever legally established on this site. We have no evidence of that. We have evidence of the permits, but not of the units. Existing does not equal permitted. There's a big difference. So just the fact that something exists there doesn't mean that it was ever legally permitted, nor does it mean that it will be permitted now. One of the neighbors did note, and this is important, this would create a precedent in the area. We've never had a termination of status of nonconformity come through, and we've never obviously approved one. Can they still build on the lot? Yes, the lot is completely buildable. It's developable with one single-family home. As I noted earlier, if they meet setbacks and impervious surface ratio and heights, they can certainly build, as the applicant said, a big, beautiful home, and there's no issue with that. The issue is not the form or even the function. The use is permitted. It's the density. That is the issue. And with that, there is no evidence provided by the code that allows staff to do anything other than recommend denial.
Is there any questions before he goes in? Thank you.
Maybe are outbuildings allowed in the zoning?
I'm sorry?
Are outbuildings allowed in the zoning?
Yeah, accessory structures are permitted. They're permitted to be up to 25% of the floor area of the home. They're limited in height to 15 feet, and they do have to obviously comply with impervious surface ratios and setbacks. But yes, an accessory structure is permitted.
Okay.
Can they be livable?
They may not have a full kitchen. That would turn them into a dwelling unit, but if these folks, for example, wanted to build a pool house that had a wet bar and a TV, like a sheet shed or a man cave or something like that, yeah, that's permitted. No full kitchens, nothing that would meet the definition of a dwelling unit. So
15 feet above first floor flood?
Sorry?
15 feet above first floor flood?
We measure accessory structures as 15 feet to from grade to midpoint of pitch, a roof or to flat roof.
Accessory dwelling units are not permitted.
That was the question.
We're-
So a mother-in-law,
Correct. I mean as an accessory structure, which like a shed or a gazebo or something like that. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, just for the record regarding that Scrivener's error, it's contained on the first page of the staff report, it's in the notice, and it's on the agenda. It's supposed to be on DR, as Mr. Perry indicated. But I just wanted to make sure you were all aware of that, where it is located.
okay. Closing remarks by applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we could go back to the PowerPoint before I start my time, that would be great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the 1999 Development Code put into place a process to terminate legally established nonconformities, specifically for density on Clearwater Beach. And that's because in that code, the allowable units per acre for condos was decreased, and the allowable units per acre for hotels was decreased. And so therefore, there were older hotels and condos, older properties, that the city wanted to redevelop that were not incentivized to redevelop unless they could redevelop, including those older densities that they had had. That has been applied dozens of times on Clearwater Beach, including in flood areas for hotels and condominiums. Condominiums, just like single-family homes, are residential in nature. They're not commercial in nature, they're residential. In this case, we have provided competent substantial evidence that these structures were there since 1935 and 1947, and that they have been used as two dwelling units, as recognized through dozens of business tax receipts submitted by the city of Clearwater going back decades, which are part of your application, by aerials, by communication with the Pinellas County property appraiser, Mr. Twitty's office, who told me that they include 1935 and 1947 on their website for the establishment of those dwelling units based on their historic data, which they no longer have, but based on data that they had that had been passed down through the years. So respectfully, I disagree. We have provided competent substantial evidence that not only were these units legally established nonconformities, but you should incentivize redeveloping them up to code so that we comply with floodplain, drainage, we comply with on-site parking, we comply with ISR. We are lower in height and we are greater in setbacks than we are required to be, except for the front setback. And the front setback, the staff has no objection to. So this is a better alternative than the current situation, which is uncode compliant, unsafe structures that are allowed to be rented out as two units today. The city has never code enforced on the property. the city has permitted the property to be rented out as 2 units. Short-term rentals are not allowed. This property is not being rented on a short-term basis. It will not be rented on a short-term basis. It's not allowed. And the alternative to continuing to operate it in the dump environment that it is as 2 rental units is to redevelop it either per this plan, which is asking for 7,500 square feet with 2 dwelling units, which they have legally established, or to develop, if you deny this, the only alternative is to continue to use it the way it's used, or build a 13,200 square foot, 30-foot tall building that's going to be more impactful, more intense on the residents. And so the whole point of the termination nonconformity is to incentivize legally established density to be redeveloped to come up to code. That's exactly what we're doing, and we respectfully ask that you approve the application based on the competent substantial evidence provided and prior approvals. Thank you.
Before we close this, the public, I have a question, so I want to ask them now before we close it. And I didn't get that far to find this out, and I don't know if anybody has access to this or can. The Pinellas County, you brought up something, Pinellas County Property Appraisers page. From looking at that, usually they have on there when there's more than one structure. Whoever has access or knowledge of this, I would appreciate it. So I'm just opening it up, whether it's applicant or staff. Pinellas County Property Appraisers page will have on there what the present use is on the property. Do they look at this as multiple residential on this site? Is it been taxed as multiple residential?
Yeah. So we got the property fund. Mr. Chair, we do have that. Let's see.
I have no idea.
More than one house per parcel. And it says total living units 2. Sorry, can you see that? Total dwelling units 2, more than one house per parcel, and it looks like, I know that I've seen it on here, that the property appraiser lists the dates of the structures as 1935 and 1947.
And it indicates both
Yeah, here we go.
units
So on
on
the
there?
second page, you'll see that the front structure is 1 story and 1 living unit, built in 1935.
Right.
And the second rear structure is 1 living unit, built in 1947.
What's the third structure?
That's essentially a storage room. Utility shed.
Was that ever permitted?
You may not have needed permits in 1947, but the city does have permits on file, but nobody has the actual,
use
Q document, from canonical times in 1947 of these structures being permitted.
So there's 3 structures that were constructed at different times, and there's only 2 permits?
I don't know I doubt there's any permit for this 1935 structure. If you can put the PowerPoint back up, I can show you the structures.
I saw it.
Yeah, so, right, that's the 1935. This is the second dwelling unit, that's 1947, and this is the utility shed. Thank you.
And Mark, the permits that we have don't show whether or not those structures that were built in the 40s were to be residential in nature or not, correct?
Correct. We have no evidence of that, but I would also like to fully address your concern.
Please.
The Pinellas County Property Appraiser does not dictate nor establish permitted or non-permitted uses. Their job is to figure out how much money you have to give them.
Right.
They look at what the uses are. They don't care what's permitted. It can be a smelting plant in a residential district, but they're going to tax you on this. So I always tell real estate agents and anyone that you can't use the property appraiser records as a litmus test as to what is permitted or not permitted. Likewise, don't ask me what your property taxes are going to be. I have no idea. That's not my job. That's the property appraiser.
Fair enough.
So you can take that with a grain of salt, what's in the property appraiser records.
Fair enough. At this time, we'll close for public hearing, and we'll have discussion and vote by the board. We open it up for discussion to any members.
Mr. Chairman, I might start. I want to congratulate the Ingalls on making a stellar choice for a place to live. My personal opinion, you won't find a more unique and beautiful place than North Beach, Clearwater in the entire world to live. And I congratulate you on that choice. And you will be amazingly happy with whatever structure you end up building on that lot, for sure. I have been persuaded, Mr. Chair, based upon the evidence of staff as presented today, the testimony of witnesses who live in this area. They testified to the narrow streets, to the parking challenges that they have today and have had for a long time out there on North Beach. And the staff's request that we consider the uniqueness of this neighborhood with regard to the coastal storm area, that I am not inclined to deviate and to grant the request for an exemption of nonconformity for this property, just based upon the testimony that I've heard today and the testimony in the record.
Okay. Dan, do you have anything? Would you like to comment? Don't have to.
I don't have a comment. I appreciate what you're doing for yourself and your family. That is becoming more of a norm nowadays, and it is something that used to be not happening. That more families are living together just because of the economy and everything else. But I agree also that to make that exception at this point would not be feasible. I do not agree with making the exception.
Guys, got any comments?
I do understand the position the homeowners are in. I'm kind of confused on the need, because having two dwellings on the property, two individual dwellings on the property, if it's all family, doesn't make a lot of sense. They're never going to be able to be sold separately. It's going to stay the way it is. So it's more essentially it's an outbuilding, or but you wanted to have it as a residence, so you want to have a kitchen there. So as much as I would like to say yes, I can't find it in the evidence that to persuade me that would be the right cost.
Any comments, Andy?
This is my neighborhood. I can appreciate your position. I've lived on Clearwater Beach for 32 years. I'm at 745 Bass Esplanade, and I agree with my fellow board member. I think that you can accommodate your family and create a beautiful residence for all of you all, listed as one residence only. I don't see the purpose of defining it as two if you're going to be a family.
Yeah, I'm having still some trouble with determination of nonconformity, and everything else, and the taxing and all that. I look at that, and I appreciate what you said, Mark. And, but, the precedence on it, I appreciate the comments from the public and other neighbors as far as party houses and such, but we have other things in our code to protect that from happening. We're not going to have short-term residential or short-term leasing going on in that area. But unfortunately, on this one here, I think the board's going to be unanimous on it. So we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to deny case FLD 2022-12030 at 869 Bruce Avenue, based on the evidence and testimony presented in the application, the staff report, and at today's hearing, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. I thank everybody. At this time, I am going to, it's been a while, we got some things in front of us. I think we're going to take a short break if the board is okay with that. Be back here, it's 3:19 or 3:20, 7 minutes or so.
You're recording.
at 3:35, and we will now move on to director's items. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Jamie Lotko for the record. We are here to look at the next 3 chapters of our comprehensive plan. Similar to the presentation you gave at your meeting last week, we will begin looking at the goals, objectives, and policies for the next 3 chapters. Again, it's going to be a large chunk of information, so I'm going to pause this time after each goal and associated objectives and policies to give you an opportunity to comment on each of those. And so today we're going to look at Parks and Public Places chapter, our Conservation and Coastal Management chapter, and our Support Services chapter. Presentation.
Jamie, before you go on, I just want to let you all know we have a lot of staff here that will be available if you have any questions affecting these specific chapters. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll get started with our Parks and Public Places chapter. That's going to provide guidance on our parks and recreation facilities throughout the city. And this chapter contains goals and objectives and policies that are coming from our existing recreation and open space elements. And I wanted to note that this chapter was largely brought over as it is. We've updated it for some current information. We've added a goal on equity, but for the most part it stayed the same because right now we have a consultant working with the Parks and Recreation Department to rewrite our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which is due to be done this year. So we anticipate coming back once that's completed to rewrite this chapter based on the new information. So our first goal is to strive to meet the needs of all users of open spaces, trails, and parks and recreation facilities. This is our new equity goal. Oops, sorry. So there's only one objective under this, and it contains a policy related to the city looking at when we design, develop, or redevelop a park, open space, trail, recreation facility, that we're considering the equity of all users when we do that. So we have 5 policies to support that, and some of those are ensuring that we have equal opportunities for all users in parks and open spaces, and that we expand access to our beach-friendly wheelchairs as well as our beach-accessible mats. So goal number 2, pause, sorry. It's a small piece of information, but I wanted to make sure we pause after each one of those to give you an opportunity to, if you have comments or questions on that. That is a brand new goal for equity. I envision that we may add some more things to that as we get through the process, but it is something that is newer.
The one thing that I've noted that we use the trail, and more specifically from Clearwater to Dunedin. That is as dark as it can get dark at night. Is that ever going to be addressed with lighting or anything?
It's something that we're considering more often in the mobility element, where we're looking at the Pinellas Trail and getting more users of that, increasing the usage and more connections to it from the neighborhood. So again, lighting has been brought up before, and it is something I think we will consider in the future. Okay.
I think, though, for clarity, I believe the trail, which is owned by Pinellas County, closes at night. So
anybody that's on it after that is illegally on the trail?
At sunset, right?
Wow, that's interesting.
So I think as there's discussion about how we can use our trails for alternative transportation means, I think there'll have to be a discussion at a countywide level about lighting of the trail if we really want to try to get some people using that for other than recreational purposes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I want to ask a question about the mats for the beach. That I get some comments or questions from time to time on just is that the best we can do for folks who need that kind of access? And I assume that the mats work the best at this time because, tide comes up and down. We have storms that come in that could wash out anything permanent we might put there. But I guess that's our best approach at the time, is to try to put down these temporary mats, like I've seen one on South Beach there by the Opal Sands now. Looks like we put in the last couple months, but somebody might speak to that. Yeah.
Art Cater, Parks and Recreation Department. Absolutely, we put in 3 locations for the mats. Unfortunately, it has to be permitted by the state, and it's taken us a while to do that. We finally got it permitted. However, they will not allow us to take the mats further than what you see right now. There's one at Pier 60, there's one at South Beach. What we are trying to do is to get one location near Pier 60 that we can put a mat and roll it. Basically, they roll the mats, but these are actually in sections if you've seen them. And we will install it when it's non-turtle season and then pick it up just before turtle season. That is what we're applying for now through another agency. You've got the Fish and Game, and then you have the Florida DEP that handles some of that. So we're hopeful we'll get that through. So that's where we are as far as the mats.
Thank you.
One quick question. When I was a kid, the pier that used to be there next to the Palm Pavilion,
Yes.
it didn't go out to the water. It went out at one point, but it didn't after a while. That had a sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk next to it.
There was sidewalk there, as well as a sidewalk going further north by the pier that was there, which is no longer there. There was a sidewalk, and we kept cleaning it off until all of a sudden the sand was like 4 feet at the very end of the sidewalk, and so then it didn't do any good because you had to climb the mountain of sand to get over. But there was a sidewalk all the way to the beach, to the water.
It seemed to be pretty stable because it was there as long as I can remember until they tore it down. So.
Well, believe it or not, it's probably still underneath the sand.
Is that really? Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to goal number 2. This is going to be more of our preservation of natural features and locating our parks and open spaces in appropriate areas of the city. There are 6 objectives that provide support to this goal, and I'll go through each one of those. 2.1 is that the city should have an adequate supply of parks, open spaces, trails, and recreational facilities. There's only one policy that will support that right now. It's about our level of service. We want to maintain a level of service of 4 acres of parkland for every 1,000 persons citywide. So objective 2.2 is about increasing the amount of parkland areas where there are additional needs for parks and recreation. There are 6 policies under this objective, and some of those are continuing to acquire parkland, continuing to locate new neighborhood parks near our schools, local or collector roads, or transit routes, and then continuing to locate new community parks adjacent to arterial streets or transit routes. 2.3 deals with preserving natural open space areas that are aesthetic or ecological community assets. There are 5 policies under this objective. Some of those are continuing to administer the city's landscape, drainage, and impervious surface regulations in our community development code, preserving our existing land that's designated as preservation or recreation open space future land use, and also designating appropriate city-owned land with the preservation or recreational open space future land use designation, and providing open spaces for nature study and enjoyment of natural assets. 2.4, the city should enhance and maintain the city's unique physical characteristics. There are 4 policies under this objective, including maintaining the integrity of the city's park system and continuing to enhance open spaces by restoring degraded natural areas or eradicating non-native vegetation. 2.5 gets into the city developing and enhancing blueways, greenways, and trails. There are only 2 policies under this objective, and that's continuing to develop greenways and trails identified in the city's bicycling and pedestrian master plan, and providing new access or enhancing existing access to blueways. And 2.6 is the city should use the Parks and Recreation Master Plan as a guide for park development. There are 3 policies under this objective, and that's about updating the master plan when the consultants finish with their study. And then also we have a recent update to our impact fee ordinance relative to parks and recreation. And then we want to update and incorporate our findings from both of those into the new master plan. And I will pause for questions on that.
I've had something come up a few times. I mentioned it once before in a meeting with the consultants and studies and all that. I'm sure there's been some research on it. Passive parks. I just call it passive parks, such as when we were younger, the parks, there was a ball field, there was a basketball court, there was whatever, and it was just open use. And our community centers you're either a member of that community, or you're paying association fees, which is all fine in doing it, but I mean, there are some areas, I just don't know what the stat, I'm not saying we need to do this, I'm just saying, is that part of the study that's saying, hey, we don't want it because there's some social issues that go along with it, there's vandalism, or is the city taking a stance? I mean, there's no open ball field that I know of. I mean, as far as somebody wants to go play baseball, if there's 10 kids want to get together and go play softball, is there an open park that more than one or in different areas that they can access that?
There's a few of them.
There are?
Okay, there's Belmont Park, there's Marymount Park, there's Woodgate Park.
That they can access freely?
Those are free. They can go on at any time except for when the park closes, which I think the hours there are 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Maybe Woodgate goes to 10. I'm not real sure. And then there's another list. I can certainly provide that to you.
I could pass that along, yeah.
But I do understand the concern, and there's been talk about it. Our ball fields, basically the soccer fields, the baseball fields, those are all fenced in, and they're used by our user groups.
Clubs, yeah.
And so I think that's where some of the concerns coming from the neighborhood, that those aren't available as much as they perhaps were in the past. So we're looking at that, how we can do that, and be able to continue to maintain the facilities
Great.
in the manner they are now.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to goal number 3. This is our Parks and Recreation impact fees to improve our park system in the city. There's only one objective under that, and that's the city should continue to administer the Parks and Recreation impact fee. There are 5 policies to support that. That includes spending funds collected at any location in the city towards recreation or open spaces, and providing an incentive within the impact fee structure for private developers of affordable housing units. That's a short one, but again, I'll pause for questions. And this one is a fairly new one that we've just recently updated.
Anybody? That was easy.
Okay. All right, that moves us on to the next chapter, Conservation and Coastal Management. This one's going to provide guidance for protecting and preserving our natural resources found within the city as well as our coastal areas, while also introducing sustainable and resilient techniques for development and redevelopment. So this chapter is going to contain goals, objectives, and policies from our existing conservation element as well as our coastal element, and then also some aspects from our future land use element. So goal number 1 is going to cover protecting and enhancing our natural resources to provide for long-term use of those resources. So there are 4 objectives that are going to provide direction for this. 1.1 gets into the city protecting dunes, beaches, floodplains, drainage ways, and other natural resources from encroachment and development. There are 14 policies under this objective. Some of those include protecting and improving air quality, continuing to restrict development density or intensity seaward of our coastal construction line, continuing to restore dune and beach areas with native vegetation in lieu of hardened structures, guiding development away from environmentally sensitive areas and ensure they don't encroach or disturb wetlands or beaches without mitigation, and continuing our erosion control during site development to contain site runoff and protect water quality. 1.2 is protecting and managing our wetlands, estuaries, wildlife habitats, and conservation areas in a natural state without unnatural disturbances or adverse impacts from development. There are 10 policies that will support this objective, and some of those are continuing to protect the marine wildlife and wildlife habitats, especially our threatened and endangered species, through professional wildlife management and habitat restoration techniques. Continuing to protect mangroves and riverine floodways from disturbance and destruction, and protecting wetlands by directing incompatible land uses away from them. 1.3 is the city should protect our city-owned and maintained potable water wells from contamination and conserve current and future water sources. There are 4 policies under this objective, some of which are continuing to administer our wellhead protection ordinance and continuing to expand our reclaimed water services to limit the use of potable water for irrigation. And 1.4 is managing our stormwater discharge for flood protection and preserve and enhance water quality of stormwater runoff into our receiving water bodies. There are 11 policies to support this objective, and some of those are updating our stormwater manual and the community development code to include low-impact development techniques, incorporating water quality protection enhancement in stormwater management plans, and seeking to meet the goals, guidelines, and regulations to provide flood protection and pollution abatement in stormwater management plans. So we'll pause there for questions on that.
Just have a question on 1.2.10. Just if you have, or if anybody has any knowledge where that is in just conversation. I mean, I know it's a goal. 1.2.10, objective 1.2.10, Cooper's Point, Campbell Causeway. Does anybody have any? Where are we?
Oh, first point, excellent. So totally watching. Sarah Kessler, Lead Environmental Specialist in the Public Works Department. So we've just kind of coordinated some stuff with public utilities and some outfall questions they had about the east plant, and so that has all been done. We have a permit from the Water Management District for the project, and so we're going to go out for RFQ. Hopefully we'll have a contract for final design, and then any additional permitting for the recreation elements and all of that kind of stuff, an RFQ for that prior to the end of this fiscal year. So hopefully we'll have an RFQ and we can start moving forward with those water quality elements and then the recreation elements and all of that great stuff on that one. So.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to goal number 2. That covers protecting development and public facility investment from storm events and flood risks related to flooding, high tide events, and sea level rise to reduce property losses. There are 7 objectives that will provide direction to support this goal. 2.1 is the city should ensure development includes strategies to reduce risk and losses due to flooding events, stormwater runoff, and impacts of sea level rise. There are 2 policies under this objective, and that's to ensure development within the floodplain is consistent with city plans and codes, as well as the National Flood Insurance Policy Community Rating System Program, and continuing to bring non-compliant structures into conformance with city codes and FEMA standards. 2.2 is identifying city infrastructure and facilities that are susceptible to the impacts of flooding and sea level rise, and evaluate projects to assess vulnerabilities to maximize the effective lifespans of those facilities. There are 5 policies under this objective. Some of those are utilizing vulnerability assessments to determine if infrastructure or public facilities should be built, rebuilt, modified, or relocated, and evaluating incorporation of stabilization or armoring of roadway shoulders or embankments where floodwaters tend to wash the roads out. 2.3 is researching and implementing standards for resilient protection in the Community Development Code to address flooding, storm events, and sea level rise for any development in flood-prone or coastal areas. There are 2 policies under this objective. That's to evaluate requiring additional freeboard, elevated finished floors, or wet or dry flood proofing for new development or substantial improvements, and to consider revising the substantial improvement and damage thresholds to reduce the number of non-compliant structures. 2.4 is continuing to protect public access to public beaches. 2 policies under this objective is enhancing access to public beaches through development of recreational lands, land acquisition, or easements and maintenance of public access, and parking to beaches renourished with public funds. And also continuing to enforce the Coastal Zone Protection Act by prohibiting vacations of existing and future beach accesses, and recognizing that all public access, street ends, waterfront parks, and parking areas are beach access easements. 2.5 is directing the permanent population and certain uses away from our coastal storm area. There are 5 policies under this objective, and some of those are prohibiting the location or expansion of hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, or similar uses in the coastal storm area, and continuing to allow or limit densities and intensities in the coastal storm areas through the Beach by Design and US 19 plans. Objective 2.6 is the city should ensure that adequate hurricane evacuation times are maintained and evaluate ways to reduce evacuation times. There are 7 policies under this objective, and some of those are requiring disaster plans for hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, or similar uses, requiring new or redeveloped overnight accommodation uses in the coastal storm area to have approved hurricane evacuation plans, and continuing to utilize our hurricane evacuation zones shown on the map. Oops, went too far. And 2.7 is identifying areas vulnerable to flooding and sea level rise and designate them as adaptation action areas. There are 4 policies under this objective, and those include mapping our adaptation action areas and defining strategies for development, investment, and public facilities, infrastructure, and utilities, and evaluating those strategies to ensure the use of the most up-to-date data for vulnerability assessments. I'll pause there for questions on that one.
Anybody?
All right. We'll roll into goal number 3. That's ensuring our post-disaster redevelopment occurs in a manner that minimizes public and private vulnerability to future disasters. We have 2 objectives under this goal. 3.1 is ensuring post-disaster redevelopment follows all of our applicable codes and considers relocation to limit future damage and repetitive losses. There are 5 policies under this, and some of those are requiring structures that are damaged greater than 50% of their assessed value to upgrade to current city codes and FEMA requirements to reduce future damages, establishing criteria to limit future development in areas that experience repeated damage or properties that suffer repetitive losses, and continuing to review FEMA repetitive loss properties and considering acquiring those properties for removal to limit future losses. 3.2 is to limit public expenditures to only necessary infrastructure needed to serve populations and study the relocation and development of that new infrastructure outside of flood-prone areas. There are 2 policies under this objective, and they are continuing to manage, repair, or rebuild damaged critical infrastructure and facilities necessary to serve populations, and also minimizing storm and flood damages. And then lastly is evaluating the relocation of non-critical infrastructure and facilities outside of flood-prone areas. Pause there. Any questions? All right. Number 4. This covers the integration of sustainable and resilient techniques into land use, transportation, housing, and infrastructure planning, decision-making, and development. We have 3 objectives to support this goal. 4.1 is evaluating and amending the Community Development Code to encourage the use of sustainable and resilient uses. We have 5 policies under this objective, and some of those are consider allowing community gardens to locate in all zoning districts, evaluating these amendments to the code to allow urban agriculture or fruit production, and considering a pilot program for commercial composting, and continuing our residential composting through the Clearwater Compost online course. 4.2 is promoting the use of sustainable and resilient building techniques and renewable energy sources in development, renovation, and rehabilitation. We have 8 policies under this objective, and some of those are establishing green building standards, transitioning city-owned properties to 100% renewable, zero-emission, clean energy electricity by 2040, amending our code to permit installation and use of renewable technology such as solar or scaled wind turbines, and researching and incorporating biophilic planning, which is the inclusion of natural objects and shapes in development, into our Community Development Code to improve air quality and reduce urban heat effects. And 4.3 is to implement and evaluate Clearwater Greenprint 2.0 to increase the city's resiliency and sustainability. We pulled over 5 policies from the plan. Some of those include transitioning the city's fleet to alternative fuels by 2040, encouraging the restoration and reuse of buildings as an alternative to demolition, and inventorying and identifying public and semi-public lands suitable for food production pilot projects. Any questions on that section?
Food production? Are you talking about public lands or?
And then it can be public or semi-public. It can be something we do in partnership. It can be a nonprofit. It could be a school.
Oh, somebody can propose a program. Okay, that's good. All right, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Goal number 5 is a new goal. It covers education on the to the public on storm events related to related risks, flood insurance, natural environment, and sustainability initiatives and best practice. We kind of have education sprinkled throughout our current comprehensive plan, so we tried to compress those into one area. So this is what we've tried to do with this goal, is to put all of our education into one goal. And so we have one objective under this, and 5.1 is the city should continue to conduct community outreach and education campaigns on flood risks, the community rating system, recreational facilities, and sustainability best practices. We have 5 policies under this objective, including communicating flood risks and benefits of acquiring flood insurance, promoting educational programs at our parks and recreational facilities on the natural environment, creating clear, credible, and compelling information on sustainability in a wide variety of venues and formats. Any questions on that one? All right, moving on to the last chapter, support services. This is going to have guidance for our public services and our utilities. This chapter is going to have goals, objectives, and policies from our current utilities elements. And this chapter is an expanded chapter. We now have goals and objectives and policies relative to our police, our fire, EMS, our library, and Clearwater gas systems that had not been previously included in our current plan. So goal number 1 covers the provision of high-quality, reliable, and efficient sanitary sewer service for the city. There are 5 objectives to support that goal. 1.1 is continuing to maintain a level of service for existing and future populations. The one policy under that is related to our level of service. We'd like for it to be, we use a number of 100 gallons per capita per day as a level of service for sanitary sewer, and we look at that when we're determining if there's capacity to serve any new development or redevelopment. 1.2 is continuing to provide advanced wastewater treatment improvements at all our water reclamation facilities. We have 4 policies under that objective, including improving and expanding the wastewater system to accommodate future development, and continuing to implement projects that support the city's decision to consolidate their water reclamation facilities. 1.3 is about providing and maintaining sanitary sewer in a safe and efficient manner. We have 6 policies to support that, including maintaining the wastewater collection system to serve existing developments, requiring properties with failing septic tanks to connect to the sewer system, and requiring an agreement to annex or annexation application and sufficient capacity to serve a property prior to providing sanitary sewer services to properties outside the current city limits. 1.4 is maintaining equitable charges to support the fiscal and capital projects and provide efficient financial management of all sewer system funds. So we have 4 policies. And that is prioritizing and scheduling major wastewater collection and treatment improvements as part of our capital improvement program, and ensuring that our sanitary sewer revenues are sufficient to fund and repair replacement projects on a pay-as-you-go basis, and ensuring our sanitary sewer charges reflect all operational costs consistent with the amount of wastewater generated by each user. And lastly, 1.5 is using fully treated reclaimed water in a beneficial, cost-effective way. We have 4 policies, including encouraging long-term agreements with our golf courses and other operators that use reclaimed water for irrigation, and also expanding the reclaimed water system to optimize potable water conservation efforts. Any questions on that goal?
Yeah. There was in here, and one of them was septic tanks.
Yes.
I think that's 1.32. Obviously, it's our goal to get residential and or commercial properties off of septic systems, I would imagine.
Yes, sir.
We can't force people to do that, right? But we're not permitting any new ones, is that correct? Do we know?
The health department.
Handles that. And when properties annex into the city, if they're on septic and if there is sewer available, I don't know that we can force them to hook up to it. Is that part of the annexation process, or is there rules and regulations that prohibit us? We can suggest it.
I don't know if we can force them to, but I think we can charge them if they're not using it and it's their property, right?
Yeah.
Typically, you don't have people that are going to annex that don't want sewer.
Yeah.
They either annex because they need sewer, or they annex to get solid waste service, and no sewer is available.
Okay. It was brought up in the last meeting. I think we had a question or something. I don't know if there's anybody here on reclaimed water, because it was brought up to me again outside of the meeting. If there's anybody here as far as our capacity, I might have old numbers that we produce like 12 million gallons a day or something, and we even sell some of that out. And I mean, are we shortfall? Do we have plenty? Or
Michael Vaca, Public Utilities. We currently have reclaimed water available to our residents. We currently are expanding our distribution systems out to our residences.
So we have surplus right now. Is that not correct?
Well, right. Drought season comes around, we start running a little bit low, but we had never shut down. Rainy season comes around, and we have a lot on hand.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's a fee for reclaim?
Right.
We currently have what they call the availability fee. It's a certain amount just to have the reclaim available for access to the residences, whether they connect up by irrigation or if they use a hose only. And we also have what they call the usage fee. I don't know the exact dollar figure, but it's based upon 1,000 gallons. So we're trying to promote water conservation by providing residences and educating them on the conservation of using, not using lawn water, and instead using the reclaim for their irrigation and other uses.
Can we eliminate, I think it was done in the harbor area, when reclaimed water went in there, that's along Edgewater Drive. You had separate meters for watering people's lawns in there back in the day, because they had well water. Is there a way that we can eliminate those shallow wells also for reclaim?
We do offer incentives to residences when we do come around to, let's say, a neighborhood. Some of them may have lawn meters, which is used for irrigation, and some people may have shallow wells. As mentioned before, there are incentives to disconnect and connect to the reclaim. Nothing says that they have to, abandon their well. They can keep it. It's just not used for irrigation. Some of the reasons what they may want to keep it for would be exotic plants, fruits and vegetables, stuff like that for gardening. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right, goal number 2 is about providing solid waste collection and disposal services that balance reliability, environmental impacts, costs, and safety. We have 4 objectives to support that goal. 2.1 is the city should focus on data collection and active route management as a tool to achieve efficiency. We have 3 policies under this objective, including reviewing traffic patterns to help determine route length and timing of pickup, and evaluating opportunities to shift from active waste collection to passive waste collection. 2.2 is ensuring solid waste is collected as scheduled and disposed of appropriately. We have 3 policies under this. Ensuring solid waste and recycling fees charged to users cover system operating costs, repayment of capital costs, and allow for repair and replacement of existing facilities, and maintaining a master plan of solid waste facilities that ensures upgrades necessary to meet standards of efficiency are planned appropriately. 2.3 is supporting the countywide goal of zero waste to the county landfill. We have 4 policies under this objective, including developing a solid waste collection and recycling, disposal, and recovery system that will reduce the waste stream, conserve energy, and minimize impact on natural resources, and continuing to reduce the solid waste stream through recycling of aluminum, mixed paper, newspaper, plastic, steel, cardboard, office paper, other metals, and yard waste. 2.4 is mitigating the impacts of solid waste collection and disposal to natural resources. 4 policies under this objective include continuing to work to limit carbon emissions of fleet vehicles and continuing the voluntary curbside source separation for recycling. Any questions on this goal?
I would only say on 2.3 that I sometimes wonder if we're missing the point on recycling versus, in that our goal should really be to reduce use and to encourage citizens to reduce their use, particularly of single-use plastics. If we reduce our use, then we don't have to worry about whether it ended up in recycling or not. Recycling is noble, but it's very complicated, and I was in another meeting this morning. Folks were talking about just what little contamination it takes in a recyclable product for them to reject it and to send it to landfill. So I really, I don't know if it's part of this or not, but I'd really like to see the city encourage citizens and tourists here to reduce their use.
I agree.
So would you like consideration of a policy or an objective?
I'd like to add that on. I think it's critical. I think we're somewhat missing the point with.
I think at our house we.
Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
At our house we've realized there are alternatives, but you have to, like, our shampoo and our cream rinse is now bars. It doesn't come in plastic. We've found it that way, and it comes in a package that you can bury in the ground and it grows plants. But it's just, you have to, educate the people that this is the way to go and have quality products to make that make sense. And that's a long way off before all that makes sense.
I know some other Florida municipalities and counties have had that kind of public education project, and it's been successful, so I'd like to see us do something in that regard here.
We're doing that at home with just, obviously drinking water and things like that. We do the metal, reusable containers, but get away from Ziploc bags, all the stuff that goes with it. It's just, you have to
change the mindset.
commit yourself to it. So it's a lot of it's out of the city's hands, and unless you outlaw it, then that would be problematic.
I know I've been on the Hawaii, and there are no plastic bags, period.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to take that kind of, I think, drastic measure, but a good place for us to start.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great suggestion.
Yep.
Anything else on this goal? All right. We'll move on to goal 3, and this is about providing cost-effective and efficient stormwater management. We have 5 objectives to provide direction for goal 3. 3.1 is continuing to maintain an adequate level of service for existing and future populations, and the policy is continuing our level of service. There's a table that's in the plan that's for that, and it's not something that I can readily explain. If you have questions on it, I'm sure I have an engineer that can help with that, but there's level of service for stormwater design that's not, I can't give you a number. It's something per the design of stormwater standards. It's in a table that will be included within the plan. 3.2 is lowering high water profiles during storm events to reduce flooding and lessen the resulting adverse effects on public health, the natural environment, and public and private property. We have 7 policies under this objective, and some of those are providing regular maintenance to stormwater management system, considering natural and man-made wetlands as a means to provide stormwater management, and continuing to designate wetlands with the preservation future land use designation. 3.3 is protecting and enhancing the quality of receiving waters by using best management practices. We have 8 policies to support this objective, including monitoring our major stormwater management outfalls and receiving water bodies to identify the quality of runoff and the impact on the receiving water bodies. Continuing to identify impaired water bodies and prioritize them for improvement enhancements, and continuing to upgrade and retrofit our drainage facilities and include stormwater treatment for water quality. 3.4 is providing sound fiscal management for our stormwater management systems. 4 policies under that, including continuing to finance the operation and maintenance of our stormwater management systems through revenues from the city's stormwater utility fee, and continuing to upgrade and improve our stormwater management systems where deficiencies exist. And 3.5 is providing economic development incentives that promote water resource protection and enhancements. We have 3 policies under this objective, including evaluating methods of financing stormwater management system improvements and new stormwater infrastructure to determine the most feasible and equitable arrangement, and pursuing a regional stormwater management system that is both economically and environmentally sound. Any questions on that goal?
Does SwiftMud still do their, I don't know if you guys still do the assessments. It used to be every 2 years. You had every stormwater pond had to be certified by an engineer.
Still every year.
It's every year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon, I'm Dimitrov Engineering. Yes, we do go out and we do have to recertify our stormwater ponds and provide that report to SwiftMud.
Does, do they still go after normally it's like condominium associations usually required for that, commercial entities, they're all required to maintain their own ponds. Are they still doing that, forcing that?
We only inspect our city of Clearwater stormwater features. But to kind of answer your question, if there's any private development happening, we do require the developer to provide us with their stormwater maintenance management prior to certificate of occupancy.
But no, SwiftMud does require a third party to certify every stormwater pond that's private.
I didn't know if they were still doing that, but, because a lot of them have under drain systems fail rapidly, so they have to be cleaned and fixed, and, look at the filter systems and that kind of thing. So I'm just curious as how they do that, if they still maintaining that stuff. So, that's good though, if it's still happening. I know SwiftMud was a little taxed on that, enforcing that for a long time. I didn't know if they were able to step up their funding for that. Just a question. Thank you.
Third-party providers do it,
Yeah.
outside engineers.
I don't know if you can answer this question, or if there's anybody here, that revenue from this stormwater utility fee, do we know if that's in our general fund or anything, or is that Staley stating for maintenance? Is it staying in and going to that?
The fees would stay in the enterprise fund.
Okay. Thanks.
It's been several years ago, but Citizens Academy, 4 years ago, I recall the comment by a since retired staff member that like a lot of Florida municipalities, our pipelines and streets and all that were often 100 years old, and no one knew exactly when those pipes would fail. Could be this year, could be 20 years from now, but when we're talking about financial management and planning for replacing those pipes, and his point was at some point we would have pipe failure and we'd need to replace all that. Has there been any kind of analysis or anticipation or budgeting for the pipe replacement?
Hello again. Yes, we have our maintenance division. Our maintenance division regularly inspects all our city facilities, and they regularly provide us with a condition assessment, so we know which locations are towards the end of their useful life, so we know where we need to focus on in the future.
We're relining some of these sanitary lines and everything already, are we not?
Yes, relining is a repair option for some of the older stormwater infrastructure.
Yeah. And there's different types of product, some that harden real, it's not just a rubber liner from what I'm told.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
I think his point was if they all failed at once, we would
Yeah.
have, it would be a big number to replace that. And
Hopefully that
so we, like a lot of Florida municipalities, were kind of running that risk to some extent, that we were doing the things you're talking about, but you know, needed to be prepared that if it cascaded on us, it could be a big number.
We hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Within this, your support, with the support service objective and tailing into, piggybacking on his comment, do you have, or have they established an asset management system? So as you are putting in new pipelines and upgrading lift stations, other municipalities that I work with, they put it into an asset management system so they know when those pipes were put in and what areas are done, and they can track the longevity of it. It's tedious at best, but it's...
We do use we have a GIS database that gets upgraded by our GIS staff. Basically, anytime we replace a pipe or we line a pipe, that information gets uploaded into the GIS system. So at that point, we know what facility was installed, when it was installed, what material it was made of. So we know when it was when the last maintenance project was completed.
They're using that for stormwater and utilities and everything else, I'm sure.
We
All the infrastructure.
Stormwater uses it, and
Yeah.
Household water.
Hello, Mike Bach, Public Utilities. Yes, we do use that services, and I will tell you, of the 26 years I've been here, this regime that I'm following now, we have major implications of pipe replacement projects from water to sanitary sewer to even expansion of the reclaim and plus rehabilitation of the reclaim. So we are very proactive. We do track the information from our lining company. It is a resin. It's like fiberglass. You get a chance to come out, be more than happy to provide you a little sample, give you a sledgehammer, and let you have that's the product. Yes, it's a trenchless technology. So public utility is always looking at means and methods to preserve money and value taxpayers, and that is one of the means and methods. But public utilities is very assertive right now with maintaining rehabilitation. Yes, sir.
And you use a GIS system to keep all your notes and all your dates of service and all that? on it?
Engineering, GPS coordinates,
That's great.
years, installation, dates, notes and various. We do have asset managements,
Okay.
tracking that.
Very good, thank you.
How are we doing for potable water? How are we doing on failures in that, or just looking at as far as, I mean, I can't lie to
Very good. I don't know the true dollar factors, but part of my job, growing up through the ranks, again, I've been here through 26 years, all with utilities and all within water. I've been on the receiving end of water main breaks. I will tell you that engineering is very proactive. We track, we know areas. You may see some of the projects currently going on across from City Hall. Franklin, that was a very old section of pipe. We tracked it. We have our own management. It was 3 breaks on it. So various knowledge throughout all of the staff we're able to pinpoint. We're also able to do tests, recon and pecon, assessments of the pipes. So example, Drew Street, it's a prime example. That's you'll see some work that's currently going out there now.
So getting into it, I mean, as you get into the residential areas, it is actually, I just happen to know some people in this industry of insurance, homeowners insurance. And with everything that has gone on, we think about hurricanes and we think about major catastrophes. But one of the major, you think about your own homeowners insurance right now, you're concerned about a fire. You're concerned about flood. You're concerned about a hurricane. The other thing that's the most damaging is a water break. A water break for a supply line, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars if you're not immediately there to do it. Flood insurance companies are now capping it at $10,000, which I'm just here to tell you, that's, unless you get it in the first half hour, it's capping out for all the older homes. We have a lot of, and I don't mean 1940 homes, I'm talking stuff 1970s and earlier, they're eliminating it. And it's a very, very big, so I mean, I know some people are taking it and getting into it and replacing the piping in their home from the underground old cast iron pipes and all, and they're bringing in the PVC from the meter and taking it up through their attics, and you know, it's pretty cumbersome in doing it, but they're doing that. But I've got to imagine the piping that's in the ground in the residential areas, are we just on a wait and fix as they go, or are we looking, because that you're getting into directional boring or whatever? I mean,
Very good. We have trenchless technology.
Yeah.
However, we're not only examining water main replacements, we also have service line replacements. Like you say, it's galvanized line that comes from the city main to the meter.
Right.
And unfortunately, the homeowners is galvanized with PVC, but the city's taken proactive, because that there again, that's our standby. That's our 24 hours, 7 days a week. Typically, that's what's leaked. So we identify areas that have old lead gas, lead service lines. Top priority. Those are projects put together we go into and replace. We also have galvanized. We track that. In fact, we have some programs coming up, neighborhoods where it's not only the mains, but all the service lines that are going through it. You may notice on some of the North Beach, you'll see some construction project going out there. A lot of those service lines have to replace, but now we're coming back through and replacing some of that cast iron. It's a both.
Okay.
It's give and take. So we try to get in and get it as much done as possible, and also working with stormwater projects. We have one that's coming up, Nash.
Yeah, actually, up to base station.
So that's stormwater. So as we're impacting the residences, we're also trying to, what can we get in there? Can we get a little sanitary sewer, put some clean outs in, stop infiltration from coming in? What's the service lines like? What's the water mains? At the same time, while they're putting in their storm and the subdrain. So very proactive.
Sounds like you're busy.
It is.
Very good.
Mr.
Thank
Gardner
you.
is great to speak with. I'm sure he'll be in here tomorrow. So
Excellent.
question.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
All right, so now we're going to move into permanent potable water. We already talked about some of that, but we'll get into the objectives for that. There are 6 objectives to support that. 4.1 is continuing to maintain our adequate level of service. And again, this is considered to be 100 gallons per capita per day at a minimum pressure of 40 to 45 pounds per square inch. That's our potable water supply level of service. 4.2 is providing an adequate quantity and quality of potable water to all customers. We have 7 policies under this objective. And that's continuing to construct potable water system improvements that provide adequate quantity, pressure, and duration of fire flows, while working to conserve energy, water, and other valuable resources. We want to ensure our potable water management projects are designed and operated to maintain and enhance natural systems as well as man-made systems. And we want to continue to extend water services to jurisdictions outside the city's service area through interlocal or other agreements. 4.3 is maintaining our water system in a safe and efficient manner. We have 3 policies to support that, include monitoring the water quality and operation of the water distribution system with the intent of repairing and replacing deficient portions of the system and requiring minimum fire flows, hydrant spacing, and proper size of water pipes to provide those fire flows when reviewing applications for new connections to the public potable water system. 4.4 is providing sound fiscal management for the operation and maintenance of the potable water system. 4 policies under that include prioritizing and scheduling our major improvements to the water system as a component of our capital improvement program and continuing to seek financial support of the water system through grant programs administered by the state and federal agencies. 4.5 is developing a potable water system that's compatible with the environment and seeks to conserve and protect sensitive natural resources. 3 policies under this one, including continuing our implementation of our water restriction ordinance, and educating to inform citizens of the need to and opportunities for conserving potable water. And lastly is protecting all natural recharge areas having functional hydrological characteristics. We have 3 policies here, including recognizing the importance of groundwater aquifer recharge in the hydrological process, and the need for groundwater recharge as an integral component of the city's urban environment. And continuing to protect our groundwater quality by enforcing our wellhead protection ordinance within identified areas. Any questions on that goal? All right, moving into goal number 5. This is a new goal that is dedicated to the provision of our permanent reclaimed water supply system. We have 3 objectives to support this. 5.1 is maintaining the reclaimed water system in a safe and efficient manner. The 1 policy is monitoring water quality and operation of the reclaimed water distribution system with the intent of repairing and replacing deficient portions of the system. 5.2 is providing sound fiscal management for the operation and maintenance of the reclaimed water system. 2 policies under that are continuing to use fees charged for the users of reclaimed water services to cover system operating costs, repayment of capital costs, and allow for the repair and replacement of existing facilities. And then prioritizing and scheduling major improvements to the reclaimed water system as a component of the capital improvement program. And lastly, 5.3 is continuing to develop a reclaimed water system that's compatible with the environment and seeks to conserve and protect sensitive natural resources. And the 1 policy is, with that is to extend the reclaimed water system. Are there any questions on that goal? All right, goal number 6, again, is a new goal, and this is for the provision of effective, professional, and dependable law enforcement. And we have 3 objectives to support our goal. And 6.1 is continuing to maintain and replace law enforcement building infrastructure and vehicles as needed. 6 policies under this objective, including continuing to schedule maintenance for our district stations 2 and 3, determining if our district station 1 should be rebuilt or refurbished, and continuing to evaluate the best uses for our satellite buildings. 6.2 is monitoring crime and activity metrics and comparing them against other local agencies. 2 policies under this objective are upgrading their monitoring systems to state and national incident-based reporting systems, and providing governance for a regional computer-aided dispatch and records management system that promotes the efficient sharing of resources and information. And 6.3 is building expertise and capacity to respond to cybercrime, synthetic drugs, and the processing of digital evidence. 1 policy of this is to identify and implement progressive staffing models that are cost-effective and advance the efficient and effective prevention, detection, and prosecution of crime. Any questions on this one? All right, number 7 again is a new goal. It covers our provision of emergency services with a focus on quality, cost, effectiveness, and all hazard mitigation. We have 3 objectives to support this goal. 7.1 is ensuring we have adequate staffing levels, equipment, and apparatus for the emergency services. We have 3 objectives under this policy. And that's continuing to achieve our baseline response time of 7.5 minutes for the first unit to arrive on scene, and then researching methods to account for low employment pools while maintaining appropriate staffing levels. 7.2 is maintaining and replacing infrastructure, equipment, and apparatus on a regular schedule. We have 3 policies under this objective, including completing the Fire Station 46 reconstruction by the end of 2023, and continuing the process of replacing the training tower and lifeguard towers. 7.3 is researching methods and best practices to account for increases in future demand, construction, populations, and tourism. 3 policies under this objective include researching and determining means to maintain service times through increases in traffic, and determining strategies to account for increases in high-rise and multifamily developments. Any questions in that one? All right. Number 8, again, is a new goal covering the provision of quality information, continuous learning, and innovative services that anticipate and support the needs of the city. We have one objective, 8.1, and this is to ensure our libraries evolve to meet the changing needs of library users. We have 3 policies, and that includes studying the feasibility of increasing meeting spaces in the libraries to allow for more community meetings, group collaborations, or individual or group studies. And also to continue providing numerous programs and services for users of all ages. Any questions on that goal? All right, and number 9, again, is our last new goal. This is for the provision and expansion of the cost-effective gas energy solutions and related projects to customers in Pinellas and Pasco counties. We have 5 objectives to support this goal. 9.1 is the city should apply for grant funding to assist with the costs related to repairing, rehabilitating, or replacing natural gas distribution pipeline. 2 policies under this objective are upgrading our above-ground infrastructure to help reduce the methane gas released into the atmosphere, and continuing to increase safety and reliability of the gas distribution system through repairs and replacements. 9.2 is researching the feasibility of entering the renewable energy market. We have 2 policies under this objective, and they're determining if renewable energy products and services would be profitable as a standalone business unit for the Clearwater gas system to operate on behalf of the city, and considering implementation of a pilot project for renewable energy projects and services to test the market. 9.3 is revising and implementing a new sales and marketing plan for the Clearwater gas system. We have 3 policies under this, including updating the Clearwater gas system logo to better market the brand, and increasing market efforts to potential infill customers where gas infrastructure already exists and is ready to use. 9.4 is creating new key performance indicators for all gas divisions. We have 4 policies under this, including reviewing all existing key indicator reports and identifying ones to retire or modify. And ensuring new key performance indicators include health and safety, contractor status for mains and services, customer and gas load growth, gas line hits and leak statistics, and profit and loss of retail service functions. And 9.5 is the city should update the 5-year Clearwater gas system strategic action plan. The 2 policies under this are holding a kickoff meeting with all department sections and individual sections to perform updates, and revising the department's mission, vision, and core value statements. Any questions on that?
Yeah. I missed the one before on the library system.
Yes, sir.
The downtown library, which going on the city of Clearwater, what'd you call it? Education. I forgot what to call it. Oh, I forgot. But I was just on. But anyways, the facility and all the amenities that it has that's used, such as 3D printing, and there's a ton of stuff at the Clearwater Library that I don't think the general public is aware of that is available for use on a daily basis. I mean, you can get your old photos put together on a CD or a tab and email. I mean, it's just endless about the stuff that's just there.
Facility?
Yeah.
Really?
And I think some of the kids might know about it, if they do something with the school programs. I don't know if they do that or not, but some way that education, and that's going to piggyback into the next thing I'm going to talk about on the gas. I'm here to tell you explicitly on the gas side of it, the general public, the commercial side of development, we know it, but the general public does not know that City of Clearwater Gas, other than just providing gas, that, and if I'm wrong, correct me, that we also install, we service, we maintain, and we sell product. And they don't know that we sell product and that we could do a one-stop shop unless something's changed, and that's all wrong. But I'd love to
Good afternoon. Brian Langill, Executive Director for Clearwater Gas System. So yes, we do all those services still. We repair appliances, we sell the appliances, and we do installation work inside the house. So not just installing the meter and serving it there, we do everything inside the house as well.
Yeah, I've talked to residences, and they're like, oh, I gotta get a plumber to do that. I don't wanna do it because I gotta get a separate plumber to do it, to pull the permit, to come on in there. And I'm like, no, you just call Clearwater Gas, just go down to their shop. You can look at appliances. If you don't wanna buy it, you can. But they'll handle the whole thing and put in the meter, and they'll actually do the house side of the meter as well, too, right?
Yep, we still do all that.
They don't know it.
Yeah.
They don't know it. I think that, I don't know if that's something we want to expand on or not, but if we have that, why we wouldn't, but.
Yeah, we can certainly add that in there, add in those retail services components as well. We did talk about the renewable energy markets, which would be another component of retail services if we wanted to enter into that business part. But yeah, we could elaborate more on that and advertise that.
And I don't know, obviously, there's areas that have Clearwater Gas already down the streets, and then to hook up, I don't know if there'd be an incentive program, if we've ever looked into that, if there's a cost incentive, kind of like we did with Reclaimed years ago when they first opened up into it. You had a free meter drop or whatever the case is if you signed up when they were coming in with it, but I know that the pipes are in and the infrastructure's in, but is there, you buy 3 appliances or whatever, or,
Yeah, we
one appliance
do,
free.
and it's in the ordinance, and we have some policies that add on more incentives to that. We have this appliance incentive, so if you buy a water heater, tankless or tank-style water heater, you can get up to $550 back on that. So we do have all those types of incentives. We do also builder developer incentives as well. So, new communities that are, going to go gas, and we'll commit to giving them those incentives as well. Definitely.
The developer knows it, but I don't think the residents are aware.
You're right. It's
something we could just.
So do you partner with Lennar and guys like that in the new communities in Pasco and
yes, we do. Mm-hmm.
Service them on that side?
Yeah, we have several communities up there that we're working with right now. Connerton being an older one back in the mid-2000s, and then, Starkey Ranch, Bexley Ranch, Astoria, all those along the State Road 54 corridor, we're serving gas in all those communities now.
Is Clearwater Gas still expanding?
Yes, we're still expanding. So we're still expanding up in Pasco County. We're adding about anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 customers a year right now. So we've got about a 5 to 6% growth rate right now in customer base. Yeah. And we are expanding in Pinellas County as well, just in, as pocket communities, new developments. Nowhere near as big as Pasco, but still though, it's, 25, 30% of our customer growth is in Pinellas as well.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Again, we have the full plan going to public meetings on June 27th at North Greenwood Rec Center and June 29th at the Countryside Library. And we will be back before you with the full plan for a public hearing on August 15th for your recommendation to City Council. We will take these same 2 presentations that you have heard to Town Council work sessions on June 5th and June 12th. We had our first public hearing before City Council on the 21st. And the second public hearing, the earliest we'll be able to get it is December the 7th, but it may end up being later than that depending on the type of review that the state will be doing. It could be anywhere from 30 to 60 days, and so if it's a longer review, it might get pushed into 2024 for the adoption.
Very good.
And that's it.
Well done.
Any other questions?
Good job. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anything else over here in directors?
Thank you.
4:39, the meeting is adjourned.
I mean, you can do 5 if you want.
No. We're adjourned. It hit.